Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Riley Whitelaw. Riley Whitelaw was born on January 20, 2005 in Colorado Springs, El Paso County, USA, the only child of Courtney, a single mother. From an early age, Riley demonstrated kindness, empathy, and respect for others. Her bright smile brought warmth and joy to everyone around her. Riley loves to draw and wants to learn to play the guitar. After attending the Air Force Academy, she proved herself to be an excellent student. Among her classmates, she was known for her calm demeanor, confidence, and leadership skills. When Riley was a teenager, her mother met a man named Chris Johnson. Their relationship quickly developed into love, leading to the decision to marry. Riley, who always wanted the best for her mother, did her best to adapt to the changes Chris brought to their home. Chris, who never had the opportunity to be a father, welcomed Riley with open arms and treated her like his own daughter, expressing that he felt lucky to be a part of her life. In 2021, Riley is 16 years old, she is more mature, and gets a part-time job at a branch of an American company that operates the second-largest pharmacy chain in the country. This pharmacy not only sells medicines and healthcare products but also provides photography services. Riley only works 2 days a week because she still has to continue her studies. Despite her busy schedule, she feels happy and enthusiastically accepts the challenge. At first, everything goes smoothly. Riley enjoys her job and always completes her tasks. She quickly gains the appreciation of customers and builds good relationships with her colleagues. Among Riley's co-workers is a man named Joshua Johnson. Not much is known about his background, but he is in his 30s and has just been released from prison. The appearance of Riley, a young girl at the pharmacy, changes his life. Joshua, who is withdrawn and hot-tempered, is Riley's complete opposite. Despite their differences, Joshua develops feelings for her. Everyone around him notices this and realizes his unusual intentions, considering Riley's age. However, he insists that he will wait until she is an adult before asking her out. Joshua cannot hide his feelings for Riley for long and begins to show his attention to her, trying to win her over. He eventually openly confesses his love for her. However, Riley does not have feelings for him. After being rejected, Joshua becomes hurt and begins to act out, trying to hurt Riley whenever possible. During a class where he is supposed to teach her and another coworker about how to work in a photo lab, he completely ignores her. This behavior frustrates Riley, as it negatively affects the quality of her work. Joshua refuses to answer her questions or offer any help. Initially, Riley was upset and often reflected on Joshua's behavior toward her, wondering what she had done to deserve such negative treatment. However, over time, Joshua crossed the line. First, he touched her inappropriately. And then he slapped her. Riley felt both angry and offended by these actions. She realized that Joshua was invading her and her personal space. Riley chose to speak up about the incident. Gathering her courage, she informed the pharmacy manager, Justin Sunni, about what had happened. Justin helped to remind Joshua. Joshua remained silent and pretended to understand. Nothing else was done to protect Riley. Not wanting to worry her mother, Riley decides to keep the meeting between her, Joshua, and her manager Justin a secret. However, she still shared with Courtney the impact Joshua's behavior had had on her. For a while, they barely worked together, and Riley tried to forget about the incident. However, when she decided to increase her hours, she found herself scheduled to work the same shift as Joshua. In early 2020, she met Jacob Lee, who was 2 years older than her. As their relationship developed, they decided to date. Suddenly, Jacob decided to work part-time at the pharmacy, just like Riley. In early spring 2022, Jacob started working, allowing them to spend more time together. Like Riley, Jacob quickly became friends with all the employees, except Joshua. Although there were no major conflicts between them, Joshua always seemed uncomfortable whenever they had to work together. Jacob wasn't the only one who noticed. The second manager, Crystal Ismail, also noticed that Joshua was jealous of Jacob because he was Riley's boyfriend. Joshua saw Jacob as his rival. Joshua still didn't give up on his love and continued to try to get closer to Riley. Feeling frustrated by his harassment, Riley finally asked for a change in her working hours. After a while, Riley needed more money and wanted to work overtime. Her boss informed her that she would have to work the same shift as Joshua because she had no other choice. Riley shared her concerns with Jacob. Riley shares her concerns with Jacob, but he doesn't take her words seriously and doesn't realize the severity of the situation. This disappoints Riley. On June 11, 2022, Riley was at the pharmacy where Crystal was in charge of management, and everything was going smoothly. Although Joshua was on the same shift as Riley, he took advantage of his coworker's distraction to enter the break room. First, he placed a busy sign on the bathroom door, then blocked the view of one of the surveillance cameras with containers, and finally taped the window. The exact details of what happened next remain unclear, but when it was time for Riley's break, she entered the break room where Joshua was hiding, ready to put her plan into action. At approximately 5:44 p.m., surveillance camera footage captured a customer named Alicia Shanky in the store when she heard a woman scream. Seconds later, she heard the door close, but Alicia ignored it. She made her purchase and left the store. Meanwhile, in the break room, Joshua attacked Riley with a knife, and the attack was both quick and brutal, and Riley died instantly. Crystal, the store manager, becomes concerned when Riley does not return to work after her break and becomes even more suspicious when she notices that Joshua is also missing. She quickly goes outside the door where the trash can is. As she approaches, she sees someone's bare feet and, feeling scared, she rushes back to the pharmacy, locking the front desk door to prevent anyone from entering. This allows Joshua to dispose of Riley's blood-stained items in the trash without being seen. He then returns home. A few minutes later, Crystal mustered up the courage and went outside again, but the person was gone. Unable to find Riley, she decided to contact the manager, Justin. She also called Jacob, but he had no information on Riley's location. Justin then went to the pharmacy to investigate the situation. It was a little after 6 p.m. when he arrived. When he arrived, he quickly began reviewing the surveillance camera footage and saw Riley walking towards the break room. In an earlier recording, he noticed Joshua stacking boxes and containers to block the camera's view. Justin walked into the break room, quickly opened the door, and turned on the lights. He was horrified to see blood everywhere. And in the corner of the room, he found Riley's body. Shocked, Justin called the police at 6:05 p.m. 10 minutes later. Officers arrived at the pharmacy, where they discovered Riley's body. She was found on the floor with her badge and headphones nearby. In addition to the severe neck injury, she had suffered several other injuries. Alicia, a customer at the pharmacy during the day, passed by the scene that evening and noticed police and patrol cars. She stopped to report the screams she had heard earlier. Police officers Steve Alonso and Mike Lee began their investigation. Meanwhile, someone informed Riley's mother, Courtney, of the tragic news. The distraught mother rushed to the pharmacy and was stunned when she arrived at the crime scene. When asked by police if she knew anyone who Riley's enemies were or who might have committed such an act, Courtney did not remember Joshua. She believed her daughter was the victim of a robbery and did not know that her daughter was actually murdered by a coworker. Police collected evidence at the crime scene and sent the body for forensic examination. The Riley had 42 stab wounds, and there were similar injuries on her hands, suggesting she attempted to defend herself. Experts concluded that she died from a lack of oxygen. Joshua fled the city early in the morning but was stopped by a patrol officer as he headed toward the New Mexico border. The officer was unaware of his actions and arrested him based solely on his appearance, as his face was covered in cuts, scrapes, and bruises. When asked about his injuries, Joshua claimed that he had been attacked in a store in Colorado Springs. However, when the patrol officer contacted Colorado Springs police, they discovered that Joshua was actually the suspect in Riley's murder and not the victim. Afterwards, he was arrested and brought back to the city. Currently, the pharmacy's representatives are not making any statements to the media. Police have denied permission to share information that might disrupt the ongoing investigation. The pharmacy has closed its doors and is no longer serving customers. Nearby, the community has set up a makeshift memorial for Riley, adorning it with numerous flowers, letters, and gifts from those who are grieving. Joshua admitted during his initial police interview that he was in love with Riley. He admitted to being in the break room with her but claimed that the incident was accidental. This confession led police to identify him as the person who had been near Crystal at the dumpster. Despite the evidence against him, Joshua maintained his innocence and denied obstructing the view of the security camera. Police later discovered his DNA on the murder weapon. After obtaining a court warrant to search his home, they found a black hoodie with blood and traces of DNA belonging to Riley. Joshua was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail in El Paso County, with his trial scheduled for June 2022. Riley's funeral was held on June 23, 2022. Her mother received many letters of support from classmates, pharmacy customers, and others. On November 15, 2022, Joshua pleaded not guilty to all charges at his preliminary hearing. The trial was originally scheduled to begin on March 6, 2023, but the defense requested additional time to prepare and requested that Joshua undergo a mental health evaluation to determine whether he was competent to stand trial. As a result, the trial was postponed. The evaluation later determined that Joshua was sane. He remains in custody at the El Paso County Jail, with bail set at $10 million. In late September 2023, after all attempts to postpone the trial, Joshua finally appeared in court and faced Riley's relatives. On the first day of the trial, the prosecutor explained to the jury that Joshua and Riley both worked at a pharmacy and detailed the events that took place there. The defense maintained that Joshua happened to be at the crime scene. They presented that Joshua entered the break room and found Riley lying on the floor. At that point, he was attacked by an unknown assailant, causing him to flee for safety, despite feeling guilty for leaving Riley behind. However, witness testimonies have made it clear that Joshua's account is incorrect. One of the longest testimonies came from Justin, who discovered the body and was the pharmacy manager that first contacted the police. The prosecutor's office also called Riley's mother, Courtney, to testify. She shared insights about her daughter, describing her as someone who loved to help others. Courtney mentioned that Riley had expressed concerns about Joshua's behavior on several occasions. She recalled one incident when Riley was working with Joshua in the photo services area, where he touched her inappropriately. This led Riley to speak with her supervisors, resulting in her being allowed to change her work schedule. In October 2023, after arguments from both the prosecution and defense had concluded, after an hour of deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder. The judge expressed gratitude to everyone who contributed to achieving justice, especially the Colorado Springs police. After the trial, some expressed their anger toward Joshua, while others chose to remember Riley as a kind, young girl who tragically lost her life because of his actions. On the podium in the auditorium, there were 3 items: an empty vase, a bag containing 42 purple stones, and a small bouquet of sunflowers. Riley's loved ones had brought these items on purpose. The stones represented the number of wounds Riley had suffered. Each person giving a speech took a handful of stones and put them in a vase. The ninth and final speaker was her mother, Courtney. She wore a jacket with the insignia of the National Guard, where her daughter served. Despite her deep grief, Courtney spoke very strongly that she would not let Joshua, whom she called a monster, take away her love for her late daughter. People admired her for this, considering it her greatest strength. She emphasized that her daughter was never afraid to express her opinion when things were not going well and always confidently led others. At the end of her speech, Courtney placed the sunflowers in a vase containing 42 purple stones before returning to her seat. At the end of the hearing, Joshua Johnson was sentenced to life in prison. Courtney established a memorial fund in Riley's name, which provides scholarships to high school graduates. In the future, Courtney plans to organize charity events that she believes Riley would have enjoyed, including art nights, exhibitions, and running. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alicia Ross. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in Markham, Ontario, Canada, to biological parents who relinquished their rights to the child. She was adopted by Marvin and Sharon Ross, who provided her with love and care. Despite her adoptive parents' divorce, they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to support Alicia. Alicia excelled in school, particularly in drawing and photography. She had a passion for traveling and exploring new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains where she met her boyfriend, Sean Hine. On August 16th, Alicia went for a walk in the park with her adoptive mother and their dogs. She seemed happy and shared that she was expecting a promotion at work to the position of senior sales manager. Alicia was proud of her achievement and expressed her desire to introduce Sean to her adoptive parents. That evening, Alicia and Sean went on a date, and after returning home, they had a great time together. Around midnight, Sean left Alicia's house, promising to call her as soon as he got home. When he called around midnight, Alicia didn't pick up the phone. Sean wasn't overly concerned, thinking she had simply fallen asleep. Sean tried to call Alicia again the next morning, but when she didn't answer, he began to worry. Unbeknownst to him, Alicia had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mysterious disappearance that would puzzle investigators and her family for years to come. When Alicia didn't pick up, Sean became genuinely worried and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Ross. From him, Sean learned that Alicia hadn't come to work, and he immediately rushed to her house on the morning of August 17th. Sharon and Julius, Alicia's parents, were planning to play golf with friends and left the house around 10 a.m. They noticed Alicia's car in the driveway, but thought little of it, assuming a colleague had picked her up. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence and found no sign of Alicia. He called the police to report her missing and also contacted Sharon, informing her of the situation. The police were already present when Sharon and Julius arrived home, alarmed by the news. Sean was the first person to notice Alicia's disappearance and inform the authorities. Moreover, he was the last person to see her alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to him, they had said goodbye at the gate where his car was parked around midnight, and she hadn't been in touch since then. When Sharon approached Alicia's room, she immediately noticed that all her daughter's personal belongings, without which she never left the house, were in their places. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, bank cards, and cash were all left in the room, indicating she wouldn't have gone anywhere, let alone left without them. The gate was open, but not forced, suggesting that the missing person either let her abductor in herself or willingly left with someone. In the backyard, the police found some disorder. The lawn and flowers were trampled as if someone had fallen there. A pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of the girl, which she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground, laid out in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, so the cigarettes didn't belong to them, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand. Sean was almost immediately considered the prime suspect. Firstly, he was noticeably nervous, and his account seemed somewhat confused and disjointed. Secondly, he was the first to report Alicia's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they too had not seen her. Additionally, law enforcement found biological traces on the girl's bed belonging to both her and Sean. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia might have denied Sean intimacy, and he decided to force her, then trying to cover his tracks and stage her disappearance, which he likely caused by ending her life. When Sean was brought to the station, questioned, and the investigator's theory presented to him, he was stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend, as he loved her. He also admitted that they did indeed have intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. The missing girl's parents also had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and quite happily, so much so that Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. The police were baffled by the disappearance of a young woman, Alicia, who had no reason to leave her life behind. She was awaiting a promotion at her job and was a responsible person, so it was unlikely she would just vanish without a word. If something unexpected had happened, she would have contacted her parents. Yet, she had left without her documents, money, and phone. The police questioned her boyfriend Sean, but lacked enough evidence to detain him. They didn't rule him out as a suspect, though, and kept an eye on him. Sean seemed depressed and upset, and the massive search effort began the day after Alicia's disappearance. The police thoroughly inspected her home and yard, questioned neighbors, and examined the surrounding area. However, no one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious that night. The police theorized that Alicia vanished between midnight and sunrise, a time when the streets are usually quiet. Flyers with Alicia's photo were distributed throughout the city, and her story was featured in the news, generating significant public interest. The police received dozens of calls daily, but most information turned out to be false or mistaken. Sean participated in the search efforts, despite being the prime suspect, and even gave a media interview, pleading for help and displaying photos of the happy couple. The search for Alicia expanded to include abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands. Her parents, believing she was alive and being held against her will, appealed to the public for help. The police suspected someone close to Alicia might be involved, possibly killing her, due to the lack of signs of struggle or forced entry. Despite their efforts, no concrete leads were found, and the case remained a mystery. 2 weeks after Alicia's disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge of driving under the influence and resisting arrest. This led to speculation that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. Alicia's parents gave another interview, revealing they had only known Sean through their daughter's accounts and didn't know him personally. They considered the possibility that Alicia might have hidden certain details about her relationship with Sean to avoid upsetting them. The police interviewed Sean's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual, but no significant information emerged. The case seemed to have hit a dead end, with the only option left being to keep pressuring Sean to confess. However, a month after Alicia's disappearance, a surprising twist occurred. Daniel Sylvester, a 31-year-old man who lived nearby, called the police and confessed to killing Alicia, revealing where he had hidden her body. Daniel was a reclusive, unemployed man who lived with his mother in a house adjacent to the Ross family home. Despite living near each other, Daniel and Alicia had never interacted before, but Alicia had seen him a few times and considered him mentally unwell due to his odd behavior. Daniel had severe socialization issues from an early age and harbored deep resentment towards women. He was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder at the age of 8 and had been receiving continuous psychological care, although therapy didn't help much. In his teenage years, he confessed to having dark fantasies of attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. Despite these fantasies, specialists were confident that they would remain just in his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions and decided not to continue his education. He became a recluse, living in his mother's house, almost completely isolating himself from the outside world. He spent his days sitting in his room, often visiting adult websites, and occasionally ventured out in the evenings to secretly watch his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He especially enjoyed watching when someone was engaged in intimate activities, which excited him. However, Daniel remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying himself with solitary activities. The neighbors hardly ever saw him and considered him a harmless guy. However, the mutilated body of Alicia was later found at the location Daniel had indicated, leaving many questions about why the police had overlooked him during their initial investigation. The condition of the remains indicated that the girl had been dealt with extreme cruelty, with injuries that suggested she had been hit by a car. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Daniel initially claimed that he had an argument with his neighbor on a bush-covered path between their homes, during which she called him a loser, angering him, and he struck her on the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. However, something in his story did not add up, and there were missing details and specifics. Law enforcement had to clarify the circumstances and chronology of events to learn how exactly the girl received such injuries. Daniel spied on his neighbor Alicia and her boyfriend on the fateful evening. He watched them from a window as they were intimate, then moved back to the bushes, but didn't leave. When Alicia's boyfriend left, she saw Daniel spying on her and became angry, yelling at him and calling him a pervert. She then turned to go back into the house, but Daniel snapped, leading to a brutal beating and murder. The word pervert triggered Daniel's rage, reminiscent of childhood taunts from girls. He punched Alicia powerfully on the head, knocking her to the ground, then choked and kicked her, inflicting 33 fractures and extensive internal bleeding. After realizing Alicia was dead, Daniel moved her body to his garage, stripped her naked, and masturbated to relieve tension. He then put the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and disposed of it in a secluded area outside the city. Upon returning home, he showered, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. Daniel confessed to the crime but claimed it was unintentional, citing his mental illness and anger issues. However, the prosecution argued that despite his mental health issues, Daniel was fully aware of the consequences of his actions and acted with merciless intent. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed Daniel's responsibility for his actions. Daniel was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kat West. The case of Kat West, Kat Dawn West. Martin was born on February 15, 1975 in Davie, Florida. She grew up as an only child in a humble and modest family environment with parents Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat longed for a sibling, but her mother's health issues prevented that from happening. Instead, she became extremely attached to dolls, treating them like they were alive, singing to them, and carrying them around in school. Kat was known for her beauty and outgoing personality, actively participating in sports and dance. However, during her teenage years, she began to show signs of bipolar disorder, which included depression and anxiety, followed by periods of extreme happiness and restlessness. Unfortunately, her parents didn't realize what was happening until later. By that time, Kat had started using alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she received treatment for alcoholism that the underlying cause of her problems was discovered. In her 20s, Kat overcame her addiction to alcohol, but managing her bipolar disorder was more difficult. She had to take several strong medications that interacted with each other and caused side effects. Eventually, her disorder was brought under control, but she had to continue taking medication for the rest of her life. Sadly, her life was cut short. Kat dreamed of a traditional life with a husband, children, and a family, but her personal struggles with a psychological disorder and alcohol issues made it challenging. Despite these difficulties, she was a popular and lively person who loved being the center of attention. Kat had aspirations to become a model and would attend castings, trying out different looks. Her idol was Marilyn Monroe, whom she admired greatly. She watched Monroe's movies repeatedly, collected posters, and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat bore a resemblance to Monroe, which she happily exploited and treasured. Although Kat never became a famous model, her photos regularly appeared in local magazines, earning her some recognition and a small following. People would occasionally recognize her on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she finally met the man she would start a family with, William West. William Jeffrey West, who goes by his middle name Jeffrey, was born in 1970 in Alabama, where he grew up in an ordinary family. As a child, Jeffrey envisioned a future in the military or law enforcement. He was an excellent student, enthusiastic about sports, and physically fit. In the early 1990s, Jeffrey enlisted in the U.S. military, starting as a military police officer. His commitment led him to become a recruiter, responsible for recruiting new members into the Army and Navy. He eventually became the head of a recruitment division. Throughout his life, Jeffrey dedicated 20 years to serving in the military. William balanced his military career with higher education, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina, and later a master's degree in criminal justice and disaster and emergency management. He was intelligent, composed, and goal-oriented, yet modest and somewhat introverted, preferring quiet gatherings to loud parties and shunning the spotlight. After marrying young, he became a devoted family man and responsible parent to 2 children. After retiring from the military, William joined the police department of a university town as a corporal, tasked with ensuring campus safety. He took his duties seriously and responsibly, although he never had to use his issued service firearm throughout his career. Kat and Jeffrey, an unlikely couple, met in the mid-2000s. At the time, Jeffrey was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their differences, Jeffrey being a stern, quiet military man and Kat being a flamboyant, bold attention seeker, they felt an instant attraction. Their differences, including their 5-year age gap, Jeffrey's existing marriage, and Kat's struggles with alcoholism, did not deter their relationship. Jeffrey filed for divorce shortly after meeting Kat, and in a whirlwind romance, they got married in a Las Vegas chapel just 5 months later in 2005. They had a daughter, Lola, and settled in Sarah, Alabama, Jeffrey's hometown, in a cozy custom-built home designed by Kat herself. The bedroom was a shrine to her idol, Marilyn Monroe, with numerous portraits adorning the walls. Despite their vastly different personalities, the Wests were known to their neighbors as a happy couple. Kat, who preferred to be called Caitlin, was a fashionista who reveled in attention. She took great care in her appearance, always donning bold makeup, stylish hair, and fashionable outfits that drew admiration. She beamed with joy, perpetually smiling, and thrived on compliments. In stark contrast, Jeffrey appeared reserved, serious, and disciplined, traits likely shaped by his lengthy military career, and often seemed overshadowed by Kat's vibrant personality. Kat struggled to succeed as a model after getting married and having a daughter. Instead, she focused on being a homemaker, but she felt unfulfilled and craved attention. With the rise of social media, Kat started posting photos online, initially harmless pictures inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe. Over time, her posts became more provocative. Sources close to the couple say that Kat's husband didn't object to her new hobby and even helped her by taking photos. This turned into a profitable venture for Kat through paid subscriptions. The couple was seen buying seafood dishes, fine wine, and candles to set a romantic mood, captured on surveillance cameras. They appeared happy and carefree, joking and smiling, with no sign of the tragedy to come. After dinner, Kat, who had previously struggled with alcohol dependence, became her online persona, Kitty Cat, under the influence of the drinks. She asked her husband Jeff to take sultry photos, first in lingerie and then nude. Jeff agreed and took several revealing shots which were posted on Kat's private profile for fans only. By around 1 p.m., what was supposed to be a romantic evening escalated into a tragic nightmare. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Wests headed to work. Although the sun hadn't risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Wests' house. At first, she wasn't sure what she was seeing, but as she slowed down, she realized with horror that an almost fully naked woman was lying motionless on the road. A woman witnessed someone standing on the doorstep of a house, but they vanished when they saw her. She couldn't determine if they entered the house or fled down the street. She was startled and uncertain, so she didn't approach the body right away. Instead, she went home, informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report their discovery. At the operator's request, the family returned to the scene and examined the body. They identified it as Mrs. West, but unfortunately there was no pulse. Her body was cold, and rigor mortis had set in. Mrs. West's body lay face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a pink bra top. A blood-stained pool had formed beneath her head, and a bottle of absinthe with bloodstains was nearby. Her damaged smartphone lay a short distance away. Since the area was quiet and residential, there were no other witnesses that night. This left a mystery about what happened between 8:30 p.m., when the West's car was last seen, and 5 a.m., when the body was discovered. The only person who might know what happened is Mr. West, but is he hiding something? Detective Michael Melhoff was one of the first to arrive at the scene of the crime. He went to the house where her body was found and spoke to the man who answered the door. The man appeared anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When the detective asked him where his wife was, the man said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then asked the man to step outside, where he told him that her body had been found nearby, identified by neighbors as Kat West. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective, confirming that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't rush to the body or show any signs of distress. When questioned about his actions the previous night, the man said he had slept soundly after a night of drinking. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also mentioned that his wife had bipolar disorder and struggled with alcoholism, which sometimes led to erratic behavior. He said that she would occasionally use their backyard trampoline, sometimes injuring herself when she missed it. A search of the house found no signs of a struggle or violence, but it did reveal evidence of a night of drinking, with 2 plates of leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle on the kitchen table. The police found Jeffrey's wife's high heels under the table and her matching underwear on the floor, but some suspicious items caught their attention: blood-stained napkins in the trash and an open bottle of cleaner. Jeffrey was arrested as the main suspect that day. He told investigators that he and his wife Kat had a tumultuous evening. After a photo shoot, Jeffrey wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He left to take a shower and returned to find Kat still sitting at the table, drinking straight from the bottle and texting on her phone. This infuriated Jeffrey, and he asked her to put the phone away, but she refused. When he tried to take it from her, they had a small struggle, during which he accidentally elbowed her face, causing a few drops of blood to appear from her nose. Jeffrey claimed that this was the blood the police found on the napkins. He said he eventually took the phone from Kat and threw it out the door into the darkness. Then, he went to bed, thinking Kat would soon calm down and join him. He allegedly had no idea what happened next until the police knocked on his door, asking about Kat. Mr. West proposed several theories to explain his wife's disappearance and death. One possibility was that she went outside to find her phone, taking the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. In this scenario, she might have fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and frozen to death. Alternatively, someone might have attacked her. Mr. West also found it puzzling that his wife was not wearing the bottom part of her pink lingerie set, and that she had gone outside in just a bra, without putting on any outerwear that was readily available near the entrance. He attributed these unusual actions to her being intoxicated from alcohol. The suspect's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and suspicious omissions. He claimed to be too drunk to recall certain details, leaving investigators to reconstruct the sequence of events. Although there were no witnesses, the evidence suggested that the 42-year-old woman died from a blow to the head, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, which was compounded by hypothermia. The autopsy revealed that the victim's blood alcohol level was extremely high, indicating severe intoxication that would have impaired her coordination and increased her risk of losing consciousness. At first, the evidence seemed to support a simple explanation. The heavily intoxicated victim had gone outside to look for her phone, taking the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. She likely lost her balance, fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and died from her injuries and exposure. However, the investigation found this scenario too convenient and suspiciously staged. Although the bottle with blood traces was found next to the victim's head and her smartphone was nearby, forensic analysis cast doubt on the idea that she had fallen and hit her head by herself. If that were the case, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, not remained alongside it. Kat's and her husband Jeff's fingerprints were found on a bottle, along with some unidentifiable smudged prints. The presence of blood-stained napkins and an opened bottle of household cleaner in the house led investigators to conclude that the couple had a violent argument. According to the theory presented in court, Kat's obsession with her online subscribers sparked the fight. In a fit of rage, Jeff allegedly struck Kat with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to make it look like an accidental fall by cleaning up the blood, but he failed to dispose of the evidence. The fitness app on Jeff's phone supported this theory, as it showed he was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived, contradicting his claim of being asleep. The police believed Jeff was trying to conceal evidence during these periods. A neighbor who discovered Kat's body remembered seeing a male figure on the doorstep who quickly left in an unknown direction in the early morning darkness. However, she couldn't confirm whether it was Jeff or someone else, nor could she say whether the person entered the house or not. The investigators were intrigued by the online presence of the deceased, who had many male admirers paying to see her revealing photos as Kitty Cat. This led them to consider the possibility of an obsessed follower among her subscribers, someone who might have tried to track her down for a personal encounter. The victim, a middle-aged homemaker, regularly received messages from men, some of which were inappropriate. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment. A few persistent fans from other states with solid alibis were quickly cleared as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep that didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, leaving their origin unknown. Jeffrey West's neighbors, friends, and family described the couple as happy and content, with Jeffrey aware of his wife Kat's online activities, which he viewed as harmless. However, their social circle was unaware of Kat's online persona, Kitty Cat, just as most of her followers didn't know her real identity. When asked if he had ever been violent towards Kat, Jeffrey denied it, saying he loved her too much to harm her. Despite this, the couple frequently argued, including a heated exchange on January 12th, in which Kat questioned their compatibility due to their differing personalities. Although Jeffrey remained the prime suspect based on forensic evidence and circumstantial details, his family, including his parents, daughter, and in-laws, were convinced of his innocence, adamant that he could never harm Kat. Jeffrey West was arrested and unable to post the $500,000 bail, so he remained in custody for nearly 3 years until his trial. During this time, he was offered a plea deal, which would have reduced his sentence if he admitted to killing his wife. However, he refused the deal, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, received significant media attention due to Kat's online fame. This publicity put a lot of pressure on the judges and jurors. By this point, the possibility of someone else being involved in Kat's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence pointed to Jeffrey West as the killer. They believed that in a fit of jealousy and while under the influence of alcohol, he hit his wife with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In a panic, they suggested that he then staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. Jeffrey's defense team, on the other hand, argued that Kat's death was indeed an accident. They cited her extremely high blood alcohol levels, which they believed affected her balance and coordination. Kat's mother gave a heartfelt testimony in support of her son-in-law, describing her daughter as eccentric, but emphasizing that Jeffrey loved her deeply and would never harm her. She also asked the court to consider the well-being of their granddaughter, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father as well. After deliberating, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter on January 11, 2021. Jeffrey received the maximum sentence of 13 years, including time served. It's worth noting that if he had accepted the initial plea deal, he might have already been released from prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Esmeralda Richiez. Esmeralda Richiez Martinez was born on August 23, 2006, in La Alta Gracia, Dominican Republic, to restaurant owners Alio Rosti and Isabel Martinez. She grew up in a happy and close-knit family with an older sister, and the two were extremely friendly. As Esmeralda grew older, she blossomed into a bright and beautiful young woman. She was passionate about singing, dancing, and showcasing her artistic talents on social media. In her senior year of high school in 2023, Esmeralda, also known as Marala, was a popular and cheerful student who was surrounded by friends. One of her close friends was 35-year-old John Kelly Martinez, a new teacher at her school. John Kelly had recently entered the public education system after passing a competitive teacher's exam and was undergoing a 1-year probationary period. He quickly won over his students with his friendly approach, treating them like peers and organizing regular outings outside of school. John, a married teacher and father of 2, prioritized his students over his family. He spent most of his free time with them, building trust and relationships. Esmeralda was one of these bright and beautiful students. On the evening of February 12, 2023, John met with his female students, including Esmeralda, outside of school. He picked her up last and introduced himself as her teacher, promising to drive her home afterward. They joined 2 other men and 2 female students, and John drove them to the beach in his car. Everyone except John and Esmeralda got out of the car when they arrived. The 2 of them spent some time alone before joining the others. They drank a few beers and took a short walk along the beach. However, their evening was cut short when Esmeralda suddenly fell ill and started bleeding. They had to rush her back home. The next morning, her parents found her dead. The autopsy revealed that she was murdered, leaving her parents with unanswered questions. The National Institute of Forensic Medicine initially concluded that Esmeralda Richiez's death was caused by a severe internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock resulting from a perineal laceration. However, following a thorough autopsy, the final classification of her death was undetermined. What led to such a tragic event when Esmeralda was accompanied by friends and a supervising teacher? The investigation shed light on the events. Police interviews with Esmeralda's friends and a review of their phones revealed crucial clues, leading to the identification of a suspect. One of Esmeralda's friends, who had been with the teacher and Esmeralda that evening, provided a shocking testimony. She claimed to have seen the professor secretly add 5 pills to Esmeralda's drink while they were at the beach. The initial police findings sparked widespread speculation in the Dominican Republic, where abortion is illegal. Many theories emerged about the cause of Esmeralda's death, with some believing she died of a heart attack, and others speculating that she bled to death due to abortion pills allegedly given to her by John Kelly. The medical examiner's report was expected to put an end to rumors and speculation. However, when the forensic examination results were released, speculation only ceased for a brief moment. Esmeralda's relatives were shocked and skeptical when they learned the results, which ruled out pregnancy. The family was unhappy with the report's conclusion because it contradicted their theory, which was supported by the investigation's findings and evidence. Previously, an examination of Esmeralda's friends' phones had uncovered numerous text messages hinting at the teacher's long-standing interest in the student, but these clues were indirect. After a failed pregnancy, an investigation found that John Kelly drugged a girl without her consent and violently assaulted her on the beach, causing severe blood loss. A few hours later, Esmeralda, died. Toxicology test results were still pending. Based on the evidence, the prosecutor's office requested that John Kelly Martinez and his alleged accomplice, Ruben Murillo Martinez, be detained, as they are the main suspects in Esmeralda's death. As a result, John Kelly Martinez was suspended from his teaching position for 90 days without pay due to the evidence against him. The prosecutor's office also requested that John Kelly be held in preventive detention for a year as the primary suspect in Esmeralda's death. To clarify, preventive detention is not a punishment for a crime, but rather a measure to prevent the person from committing further crimes while the investigation continues. New investigations, including fresh episodes and eyewitness interviews, have deepened the mystery surrounding the student's tragic death. Despite multiple stops during the journey to tend to her severe bleeding, neither the individuals assisting her nor the entire company took the crucial step of calling emergency services or rushing her to the hospital. Several stops made by the defendants were captured on surveillance cameras. Witnesses reported that they purchased alcohol and that Esmeralda and John went to the restroom together. They also visited a pharmacy to buy medication, water, and feminine hygiene products. It was later discovered that Esmeralda had to change her clothes completely at one of the stops because they were soaked in blood. After Esmeralda was dropped off at home, her parents noticed she was bleeding heavily. Assuming it was related to her menstrual cycle, her mother gave her a painkiller to help her fall asleep. One of Esmeralda's cell phones revealed that she had sent an audio message to a friend in the early morning hours, pleading for help and saying, "Please help me, I'm bleeding." Unfortunately, the friend didn't hear the message until it was too late. The next day, Esmeralda was found unresponsive on her bathroom floor, covered in blood. On February 14th, John Kelly Martinez was arrested, and his home was searched the following day. The clothes he wore on the night in question were seized during the search. Additionally, his cousin, Ruben Murillo, was accused of trying to hide John's bloody pants. The investigation into the event has been plagued by ambiguities. Rather than fueling speculation, the prosecutor's office should have provided clarity on the circumstances surrounding the young girl's death, which had alarmed the public and sparked demands for a thorough and high-quality investigation. Many people felt that the investigation had missed crucial evidence, including a thorough search of the teacher's home and car, which were potential crime scenes. The authorities quickly requested to examine the car, but John Kelly's wife sold it soon after, raising suspicions that she was trying to hide evidence. The car's new owner was Panaga Pillar. Only when the authorities threatened to take action against J.C. Espinal Rowe, John Kelly's wife, and Frank Panaga for their alleged involvement in the case did they finally inspect the car. Although they found traces of Esmeralda's blood, no other significant evidence was discovered. The court decided that there was not enough evidence to keep J.C. Espinal Rowe in jail, so she was released. The investigation continued for several months. The prosecutor reopened the case, re-interviewing the 3 girls who had been with Esmeralda that night. Their testimony helped investigators piece together the events of that night, minute by minute. At 7:30 p.m., John Kelly Martinez, 35, and his cousin Ruben Marilla Martinez went to Esmeralda's home in La Otra Banda Igay with the 3 girls in the passenger compartment of the car. John, posing as Esmeralda's teacher, coaxed her away from her mother, promising an exciting evening with her classmates. Initially, the plan was to take the group to an amusement park, but John changed his mind en route and chose a new destination. It's likely that John had no intention of going to the amusement park and instead opted for a quiet evening at Mile Beach. During the drive, John stopped at a store to buy a beer and asked his brother to move to the back seat, allowing Esmeralda to sit in the front. John had a thermos with him, which he filled with beer and secretly added 5 unknown pills. He offered the drink to Esmeralda without warning her about the pills, but one of her friends noticed this when they arrived at the beach. The 3 girls left the car, leaving Esmeralda alone with John. They spent about 30 minutes alone in the car, which didn't go unnoticed by Esmeralda's friends. Suddenly, John emerged and instructed everyone to get back in the car, claiming they needed to leave urgently. During their journey, they had to make multiple stops due to Esmeralda's heavy bleeding. One of these stops occurred at 9:45 when they pulled into a gas station parking lot. There, Esmeralda visited the restroom in the cafeteria, as confirmed by eyewitness accounts and CCTV footage. Esmeralda's classmate reported that she asked to stop at a gas station because she needed to use the restroom. When Esmeralda went in with her friends, they were shocked to see that her clothes were covered in blood. The restroom was also heavily blood-stained, requiring they to mop the floor. They were frightened and asked the gas station attendant if this was normal, and she told them it was not, and that they needed to take Esmeralda to the doctor right away. They told John Kelly, Esmeralda's teacher, about the situation, but he refused to take her to the hospital, fearing he would be arrested. An investigation later confirmed that Esmeralda's blood was found in the parking lot and restroom at the gas station. Surveillance footage and a receipt also showed that they had stopped at a pharmacy to buy medical supplies, including sanitary pads, at 10:21 p.m. John Kelly eventually dropped Esmeralda off at her home around 11 p.m., but she was still heavily bleeding, having been left alone in the car with him. A subsequent medical report on February 16th revealed that Esmeralda had suffered severe and brutal abuse, resulting in massive blood loss and hypovolemic shock. While this condition could have been treated, Esmeralda never received the life-saving medical attention she needed that night. Esmeralda's toxicology report revealed the presence of a synthetic gestagen, a key ingredient in abortion pills. However, it had already been established that Esmeralda was not pregnant. This substance is taken orally as a contraceptive and works by suppressing ovulation and fertilization. Given its presence in her body, it's likely that John Kelly, her teacher, had planned to engage in intimate relations with her. After a series of medical examinations, Esmeralda's body was finally laid to rest at the Albano Public Cemetery. Her family and friends, including Malala, bid her a sad farewell, remembering her as a kind and cheerful person. Her devastated parents couldn't help but replay the fateful evening in their minds, blaming themselves for trusting John Kelly with their daughter's care and allowing her to go for a walk with him. On June 4, 2023, prosecutors charged John Kelly Martinez, a math and physical education teacher, in connection with the death of Esmeralda Richiez after reconstructing the last hours of her life. 8 days later, on June 12, 2023, the LA Alagia Prosecutor's Office filed an indictment and requested a trial against Martinez and his cousin, Rubiel Milo Martinez, in the LA Alagracia Instructional Court. The trial was initially scheduled for August 23, 2023, but was postponed due to Storm Franklin and rescheduled for November 24, 2023. However, the judge later ordered that John Kelly Martinez be retried as the sole defendant in Esmeralda Richiez's death. The new trial was initially set to begin on January 9, 2024, but was rescheduled again because only half of the witnesses showed up. The trial is now scheduled to take place on February 1st and 6th, 2024, before the Collegiate Court of the Penitentiary Chamber of First Instance of La Altagracia. The defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case relied too heavily on the idea that the victim's parents were responsible for her death, rather than focusing on the actions of the defendant. The prosecution, on the other hand, presented a significant amount of evidence, including witness statements, expert testimonies, and physical evidence, to build a strong case against the defendant. During the trial, the defendant attempted to portray himself as a victim, claiming that his interactions with the victim on the night of her death were consensual. When Professor John Kelly Martinez brought Esmeralda home, she was alive and in good health. However, the court documents reveal that Martinez voluntarily inflicted severe injuries on Esmeralda, including lacerations, abrasions, and contusions, which ultimately led to her death due to acute internal and external bleeding and hemorrhagic shock, as confirmed by the autopsy report. Despite Martinez's statement in court, it had no impact on the judges or the audience. On March 14, 2024, Martinez, 36, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for violent conduct. He will serve his sentence at the Anamuya Correctional and Rehabilitation Center. Additionally, Rubiel Maro Martinez, the defendant's cousin and an accessory after the fact, was given a conditional enforcement measure requiring him to make regular court appearances in Hayward. Following the enforcement measures against Martinez and his cousin, the family's attorney, Raimundo Rosario, expressed satisfaction with the outcome and stated that the family would not pursue further investigation. Esmeralda's mother, Isabel Martinez, regretfully recalled allowing her daughter to walk with the teacher and 3 friends. She had previously spoken to the teacher on the phone, asking if he was a teacher, and he had confirmed that he was. She had trusted him to take care of her daughter, not knowing that he was a danger to her. The Ministry of Education offered support to the families of the deceased girl and the other girls who were with her on the day of the tragedy. They expressed hope that such cases would not happen again in the education community or in society. For the grieving parents, their fight for justice had just begun. A fun evening outing that included a beach visit had turned into a night of terror, resulting in the tragic death of Esmeralda Richiez, who suffered fatal injuries at the hands of the man entrusted with the care of children. Everyone involved in the evening's events bears some responsibility for what happened. Marala, however, was too afraid to confide in her parents due to their extreme strictness. We've all been there, afraid to speak up because we fear punishment or being misunderstood. But in this tragic case, fear triumphed, resulting in the devastating loss of a precious life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She had an older sister named Lynn. During her 2010 university break, Catherine met Rafal Novak, a 31-year-old employee, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal, a tall, handsome blonde from Poland, caught her attention. He had moved to England about 4 years earlier, leaving behind a former wife and son. Catherine and Rafal started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site's cafe. However, their lunches soon turned into romantic dinners. Raphael wooed Catherine with thoughtful gestures, such as giving her beautiful bouquets, taking her to movies, and going on walks together. As they grew closer, Raphael opened up to Catherine about his past life and his reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting nature led her to open up completely to the blonde man, Raphael Novak. Their relationship accelerated rapidly, and within a few months, she introduced him to her parents, who warmly welcomed him into the family and hoped for their future happiness together. As their relationship blossomed, the couple began planning their wedding, which was set to take place in 2011. After graduating with honors from Bath Spa University, Catherine secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly excelled in her career, generating job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine's exceptional qualities, including her intelligence, education, and people skills, made her a remarkable leader. She was empathetic towards her colleagues, always willing to lend a helping hand, and her kind gaze and radiant smile earned her the respect and admiration of those around her. As Catherine's career soared, her substantial earnings, combined with Raphael's, enabled them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace on Whitelaw Way. Catherine and Raphael, a young couple with successful careers, bought a house with a mortgage and secured insurance coverage through their agreement with the bank. They seemed to have everything they needed for happiness. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on September 12, 2012, a day that would be a turning point in their lives. As the investigation into their lives progressed, new and surprising facts came to light. These revelations slowly exposed the deception that had been present in their relationship from the beginning. It turned out that Raphael, 29, had fled Poland to escape significant debts, leaving behind a wife and child. He moved to the UK, where he began a relationship with Anna Lovage in 2008. Later, he met Catherine Wellsborough, and for a time, he saw both women. Ultimately, he chose Catherine, seeing her as a more suitable partner for building a family and achieving financial stability. Catherine had genuine dreams of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family. However, Novak, her partner, was secretly planning to murder her. He intended to use the life insurance payout and inherit their large house, which Catherine had partially paid for. On the day Catherine disappeared, Novak waited a few hours before approaching her boss, pretending to be worried and distraught. He acted convincingly, deceiving her colleagues and relatives. When Catherine could not be found at her parents' home or her own, and her car was missing, Novak fabricated a story about her receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. Her family then contacted the police. The family gathered in the young couple's living room, waiting for Catherine's return, when they received devastating news. A burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael described the evening before her disappearance as uneventful, saying they went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, and watched TV together before bedtime. Catherine seemed normal and not frightened or distressed. However, further investigation revealed that Catherine's death occurred earlier than initially thought. She was strangled around 2 a.m. while sleeping in her own bed. Her body was then placed in the car, driven a short distance from the house, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Despite this, Raphael had a solid alibi, claiming he was at work from 5:30 a.m. and Catherine was still in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m., but a crucial detail emerged. Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly changing the direction of the case. As a result, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wellsborough's murder. Evidence mounted against him, and he was detained for further investigation. Raphael claimed Catherine was being stalked by someone who had sent her threatening letters and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, proof of Catherine's secret online life was uncovered, revealing accounts on adult websites and intimate exchanges with men that her loved ones knew nothing about. A letter from a secret admirer was also found, but despite attempts to hide the truth, the evidence ultimately came to light. Rafal tried to mislead the investigation, but he made a critical mistake by not destroying key evidence that linked him directly to Catherine's death. This oversight gave the prosecution a motive to pursue. Examination of Novak's phone revealed that he had ongoing communication and meetings with Anna Lovich over the past few months. Further investigation revealed that Rafal also had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000, with each other as the sole beneficiaries. The significant life insurance payout emerged as the primary motive behind Catherine's murder and the arson of her car, which was intended to throw off the investigation. On the day Catherine disappeared, police found a message on Anna Lovich's phone from Catherine. They also discovered that Anna and her uncle had filled a gas canister at a gas station a few days before the crime. This led them to suspect Anna and her uncle, Tad Dmitry Shin, of being involved in Catherine's disappearance and trying to cover their tracks with arson. The investigation revealed that Anna, her uncle, and a third person had planned the crime meticulously over several months. They created fake accounts on pornographic websites, uploaded doctored photos of Catherine, and fabricated conversations with men to mislead the investigation. However, when confronted with the evidence, Anna and her uncle eventually cracked and started pointing fingers at each other. Anna accused Novak of killing someone for insurance money, while Novak claimed Anna did it out of jealousy towards a rival. The true culprits crafted a deceitful narrative around an innocent young woman, Catherine. They created fake online profiles for her, suggesting she was looking for casual sexual encounters. To cover their tracks, the conspirators went to great lengths to mislead investigators. They set Catherine's body on fire and fabricated a fake history for her, portraying her as a secretive and promiscuous person with many desires. They even created the illusion of a mysterious lover who might have killed her. One of them sent a text from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day she died, implying she was on her way to meet this fictional person. When forensic experts investigated the car fire, they found that Catherine was wearing her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have worn to meet a man, as she had claimed. This discovery led them to suspect that she was attacked in her own home rather than in the car. The police also found that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the remaining pillowcase had been recently washed and hung to dry. Further investigation revealed a SIM card in Anna Lovich's trash bin that was linked to the phone number Catherine had supposedly used to send texts that morning. Additionally, detectives discovered notes written by Lovich, indicating that she was trying to come up with ideas for messages to make it seem like Catherine was communicating with a mysterious person. As the evidence against them mounted, Novak and Linovich changed their story, claiming that Catherine's death was actually the work of a hired hitman. However, just before the trial began, Lovich attempted to create a distraction by having a fellow inmate pass on a fake confession from a supposed hitman who claimed to have been paid £20,000 by Novak to kill Catherine. Rafal Novak's girlfriend Catherine was murdered, and a fictional story written by Vinovich sheds light on the gruesome details. The story claims that Catherine's body was found in the trunk of her car, and the killer, supposedly a hitman, helped Novak stage her death to look like a murder-suicide. According to the story, Novak placed Catherine's body in the driver's seat, removed the tape from her mouth, put on her shoes, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her goodbye before setting the car on fire. In reality, Novak played the role of a grieving boyfriend to perfection, even convincing Catherine's mother, Jane, of his innocence. He told her that Catherine was receiving threatening messages from an ex-boyfriend and that she had spoken of taking her own life. Novak's act was so convincing that Catherine's parents comforted him, unaware that he was responsible for their daughter's death. In fact, Catherine's mother even hugged Novak after her death and allowed him to call her mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Catherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The three defendants stood to gain a significant sum of money and property from Catherine Wells Burr's death. They had planned to receive a £123,000 life insurance payout and take ownership of her two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that Rafal Novak showed no emotional response when the police found Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th. Meanwhile, Anna Lagvinovich frequently shook her head and laughed during the proceedings, implying that Novak was responsible for the crime. However, she refused to testify in her own defense. Dmitry Sheen also chose not to take the stand. According to reports, Judge Justice Sharp delivered a scathing rebuke to the defendants, in which she characterized the murder as a terrible, merciless crime that had been cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. Furthermore, it was reported that during sentencing, none of the three defendants displayed any emotion. Judge Sharp imposed mandatory life sentences on the three Polish nationals with a minimum of 32 years in prison and no possibility of early release. According to Judge Sharp, the defendants had taken the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, solely for financial gain. Judge Sharp specifically rebuked Rafal Novak, saying, "The photos of you holding Catherine's hand the evening before her death and buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner are utterly chilling. Your emotions were directed only at yourself." Turning to Anna Lagvinovich, Judge Sharp declared, "Your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime." The judge addressed Dmitry, stating that the murder was driven by financial gain, with aggravating circumstances and no mitigating factors. The judge emphasized that the only sympathy should be reserved for Catherine's family, including her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn, who have suffered greatly. The judge expressed deep condolences to Catherine's parents, noting that they were deceived by Rafal Novak's facade, unaware of his true nature, which was devoid of remorse and decency. The judge reiterated that the crime was motivated by greed, as Novak and Catherine had no personal ties, being neither married nor having children together. In contrast, the case of Anna Lagvinovich was driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Catherine's mother was overcome with emotion in the courtroom as her statement was read, describing her daughter as a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. "My daughter had a bright and promising future with unlimited potential." As her parents, Phil and I couldn't help but feel immense pride in the young woman she was becoming. However, our lives were forever changed by the cruel and calculated act that took Catherine's life away from us. The hatred shown to her is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I'm left with the unbearable pain of never having had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her how much I love her, or to hear her say, "I love you, Mommy," one last time. Catherine Wells Burr's father, Philip, was outraged that his daughter's boyfriend, Rafal Novak, had betrayed their trust. Novak had been living with them and was like a son, but he was accused of murdering Catherine. Despite his innocent claims, Novak showed no emotion when Catherine's body was found and initially didn't mention her when questioned by police. Instead, he asked for a steak dinner. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that she had concerns about Novak when he and Catherine bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believed Catherine's life was in danger and that she had signed her own death warrant by signing the mortgage. In the end, the jury found Novak guilty of murdering Catherine by suffocating her with a pillow while she slept. He had planned the murder with his secret lover, Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, Tavush Dmitry Shine, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share of the house. Vinovich and Sheen helped dispose of the body by transporting it in Vinovich's car to a remote location where they set it on fire. Meanwhile, Novak had already started his workday, providing himself with an alibi. The three Polish nationals were found guilty of the crime by the Royal Court of Bristol. The events leading up to the murder involved secret meetings and phone calls between Novak and Vinovich, who were unaware that Catherine was involved in a love triangle. To mislead detectives, they created fake online profiles for Catherine on adult websites and sent her messages from a supposed mysterious admirer. Catherine's parents have called for stricter immigration controls following her death. They believe that if the UK had immigration rules as strict as those in the US, Novak, who was convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed into the country. The couple blames the European Union for the current lax entry measures for foreign nationals. Jane Wells Burr emphasized that people entering the UK are not properly vetted, pointing out that they were unaware of Novak's previous assault charge in Poland. Catherine's family members broke down in tears as the sentence was handed down in court, while the three convicted perpetrators remained emotionless. The trio received life sentences with no possibility of parole. In essence, the three immigrants from Poland had exchanged their aspirations for a successful and wealthy life for a lifetime of imprisonment due to their own actions. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother delivered a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. She recalled her daughter's accomplishments and remembered her as determined, hardworking, and full of potential for a happy life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Smith family. George, from a happy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, grew up with his father's liquor store as a central part of his life. After studying business at Babson College, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst, but his true passion remained the family business. So, he eventually returned home to learn the ins and outs of the store from his father. In 2002, George met Jennifer, also from Connecticut, at a friend's reunion. Jennifer had just started her teaching career as an elementary school teacher. The couple fell deeply in love, and George's parents were overjoyed with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. They got married at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, with the ocean as a stunning backdrop. The honeymoon cruise that followed was meant to be a relaxing and joyful experience. However, it turned out to be a mysterious and frightening journey that filled them with uncertainty. George and Jennifer met Josh, a 20-year-old from California, and another couple on a cruise ship. Josh quickly became friends with George, and on July 1st, the group decided to spend the day together on land when the ship reached the Italian coast. They had an amazing time exploring the island, trying local food, and creating unforgettable memories. That evening, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the ship and decided to have a fun night, enjoying appetizers and drinks before heading to the casino. George and Josh played craps while Jennifer played poker. Although they lost a significant amount of money, they didn't regret it, joking that it was part of their honeymoon. The last time George was seen on video was leaving the casino around 2:30 a.m. Tragedy struck on the morning of July 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos. George, 26, vanished. The ship's captain searched the cabin where strange footprints were found, as well as the deck, but George was nowhere to be found. The available evidence suggested that something serious had happened, possibly involving violence. The news spread quickly, causing alarm among the passengers. Deck 7 was sealed off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. After discovering blood, it was assumed that George and Jennifer had mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge of the investigation, searching their stateroom for clues. One possibility was that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found where she was having a pre-booked massage. She seemed surprised and concerned, claiming to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she hadn't seen him since the previous night. She revealed that when she woke up that morning, her husband wasn't there. But she didn't search for him, assuming he was with friends or in another cabin. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation, and the ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers, expressing hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police investigation into George Smith's disappearance began with his wife Jennifer, who was agitated and seemingly unaware of her husband's whereabouts. She told them that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had come to her door, saying George might have fallen overboard. Traces of blood were found on the boat's awning, suggesting something terrible had happened. The investigators focused on cabin, which was in disarray, with signs of a possible struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators discovered 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, which were identified as George's blood. All evidence pointed to George being harmed inside the cabin before he vanished mysteriously. A chair on the balcony had been moved, suggesting someone had sat there, which raised suspicions that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and blood on the awning and inside the cabin also hinted at a possible murder. The investigators started to reconstruct the events of that night, trying to figure out who George was with and what led to the tragedy. They questioned the group of young men who had spent time with the newlyweds the previous night. The men revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol, and they had helped him back to his cabin, where they put him to bed and left him alone. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd, but video footage showed Jennifer stumbling away at 3:30 a.m., leaving George with her new friends. Lloyd's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., contradicting Josh's account. The investigation continued, with each new detail adding more mystery to the story. It was discovered that Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old with Russian roots, had been part of the group that night. He had met Jennifer in the casino, and they had gambled together until late. The group then headed to the disco, where they continued to drink and dance. As the night wore on, the group members began to disperse to their cabins, but not before they were visibly drunk and rowdy. The events of the night became increasingly unclear, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. After the cruise ship staff refused to serve 2 intoxicated visitors, Josh and his friends remembered they had brought a bottle of absinthe from the island of Mykonos. However, crew and passengers were not allowed to consume their own alcohol on board. Josh went to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe from his cabin, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%. George hid the bottle in his shorts to avoid detection. Around 3 a.m., when the ship was quiet, a janitor caught the group, including Josh, George, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, drinking the absinthe. This incident became a key part of the investigation. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively sober, began to stagger and eventually leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Her behavior was misinterpreted by some witnesses, who thought she was either trying to keep her balance or flirting. Later, Jennifer got into a conflict with her husband George, which ended with her hitting him. It was unclear whether this was done in a playful or angry manner. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., stumbling and visibly intoxicated. The janitor, who had previously noticed the group drinking absinthe, helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right, although her stateroom was on the left. Later, Jennifer was found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock showed 4:52 a.m., but George was not present. The curtains on the balcony doors were tightly closed, despite the breeze. This raised questions about George's whereabouts. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, who were staying in a neighboring cabin, reported hearing a noise on their floor around 4 a.m. They heard loud noises from the newlyweds' stateroom, followed by brief silence, loud talking, and an argument on the balcony. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. He then saw 3 unknown men outside the cabin, but did not see George or Jennifer. Several passengers reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the ship's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the witnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. The investigation raised questions about whether one of the men who entered the cabin might have stayed behind to steal from the newlyweds. The key card records confirm that George and his friends entered his stateroom at 4:05 a.m., according to their testimony, but there is no record of them re-entering the cabin afterwards. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. One theory is that George was the victim of a robbery. George and his wife Jennifer had been drinking heavily that night, and by 3:30 a.m., they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting they may have been drugged. Witnesses claimed that George and Jennifer had large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings, and that they wore expensive jewelry, including a Breitling watch and an engagement ring. It's possible that their quarters were turned over, and the traces of blood on the sheet could have come from an attempt to remove George's watch. Another theory is that George's death was related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain suggested that George might have had an accidental fall while drunk, and experts noted that absinthe could cause hallucinations in high concentrations. However, the absinthe George and Jennifer purchased was bought officially in Europe, and experts believe it was unlikely to cause hallucinations. The FBI investigation into George's disappearance involved interviewing several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, who both passed polygraph tests. Josh Askin failed his polygraph test, which may indicate that he was hiding something, but it could also be due to the interrogation tactics used. A videotape showing 3 men, including Russians, joking about George's disappearance was found, with one of them saying, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which could be a hint about what happened to George. In 2009, 4 men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin, were interviewed by the FBI as witnesses. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers, citing the Fifth Amendment, and their testimony remained ambiguous. The George Smith investigation was influenced by Greg Rosenberg's testimony, who claimed that he and others ordered food to their cabin that night, which would have provided an alibi for the Russian men. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as ship records do not support the order, and the cabin's delivery service was blocked the day before. Furthermore, the staff was instructed not to provide service to them that night. Greg Rosenberg's account of the relationship between George and Jennifer was also unclear, as he claimed it was difficult to determine due to heavy alcohol consumption. He emphasized that everyone in the group was highly intoxicated, making it impossible to draw conclusions about their relationship. However, there are contradictions in Greg's testimony, as Josh Askin stated that Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions added complexity to the investigation, requiring further verification and fact-finding. Greg claimed that he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but believed that the event was not accidental. He hinted that something significant happened that night that would eventually be revealed. Sadly, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in 2019, and his death remains unsolved, with police investigating a possible link between his murder and George's death. The Smith family persisted in demanding the truth and justice, but their efforts yielded little results. They offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to those responsible, and called for a boycott of the ship owners' company, which they believed was covering up the incident. The family's relationship with Jennifer became strained as her behavior seemed suspicious, and her reluctance to share information raised concerns. She claimed to be following FBI instructions, but her decision to accept a $1 million settlement from the cruise company led the Smith family to lose faith in her and suspect that she was hiding something. The Smith family was disappointed with the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They believed that she was not showing the proper interest in finding out what happened to George. Jennifer claimed to remember little from that night, after 2:30 a.m., and was not aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, leading them to seek the help of independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted further studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. The investigation into George Smith's disappearance aimed to determine whether his death was a murder or an accident. Henry Lee, an expert, suggested that the balcony's height made it uncertain whether George died from a fall, and alternative scenarios, such as being pushed by someone or being in a state of insanity, could not be ruled out. Lee planned to simulate a fall from the balcony using a dummy to gather more evidence, but the cruise liner's owner refused to allow it. This decision raised suspicions among George's relatives, who believed it was an attempt to conceal the truth. The FBI conducted their own investigation, focusing on the 4 men who spent the night with George, including Josh Assen and 3 Russians. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the confusion. Despite the lengthy investigation and multiple theories, the truth behind George's disappearance remains unknown. His family continues to seek answers, suspecting foul play and initially pointing fingers at Jennifer, his new wife. However, they eventually cleared her of suspicion and received a payout from the cruise company. The family used the payout to secure the release of the investigation results, including witness statements and other evidence. Jennifer, now exonerated, dedicated herself to charity work in George's memory. Years later, Jennifer remarried, but the case remains unsolved. The FBI closed the investigation due to lack of evidence, ruling George's death an accident. The mystery surrounding his disappearance continues to haunt his family, who are still searching for the truth and a sense of closure. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez. Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in Oñan, the capital of Paraguay. She was the oldest of 2 daughters in a poor working-class family. When the girls were still young, their parents divorced. Their mother, Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise them alone. She worked multiple jobs because her ex-husband did not provide any financial support and showed no interest in their well-being. When Romina was still in school, she started working to support her mother and younger sister. At 17, she entered a romantic relationship with a boy named Christopher. He courted her sweetly, and they dreamed of a future together. However, their happiness ended when Romina discovered she was pregnant and told Christopher. He responded by giving her an ultimatum that she could either have an abortion or they would break up for good. Romina was deeply wounded by her lover's words, but after talking to her parents, who she had always been close to, she made the decision to keep the baby. Her greatest fear was that having an abortion at such a young age might prevent her from ever becoming a mother in the future. Therefore, she felt she had no other option. Christopher, true to his word, ended all communication with her and showed no interest in Romina or their child's well-being. At 18, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. The arrival of the baby only made their already difficult financial situation worse. Money was extremely tight, and now Romina had to support her grandson too. Feeling depressed about their circumstances, she wanted to improve things and help her family, but she struggled to find a well-paying job in Paraguay. She called her aunt, who lived in sunny Spain. Her aunt invited her to come stay, saying it would be easier for Romina to settle there and that Europe offered more opportunities than Latin America. Without thinking too much, Romina packed only the essentials and bought a plane ticket to Spain. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister, planning to bring him to her once she found a new home and a stable job. In late summer 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to Alcobendas, a provincial town, where she stayed at her aunt's house. She quickly started searching for a job, and luck was on her side. She secured a position as an administrator at a hotel, earning a good salary. She sent some of her earnings back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, so as not to impose on her generous relatives. Romina soon met a man named Javier, and they entered into a tumultuous relationship. Like her, Javier had immigrated to Europe seeking happiness and a better life. He was originally from El Salvador, worked in construction, and appeared to be a serious individual. However, when Romina became pregnant, Javier was once again unprepared for the responsibility of parenthood. Despite this, they attempted to live together for a time. Unfortunately, shortly after their son was born, they ultimately separated. Romina found herself in a challenging situation, stranded in a foreign country with a newborn and unsure of what to do next. For a time, she returned to her aunt's house, where she received support and assistance. When the boy was about 6 months old, Romina returned to work because she couldn't afford to stay home. A few months later, she faced another shock. She had been ignoring her poor health and weakness, thinking they were just due to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina finally visited the doctor, she received a cancer diagnosis. She underwent several rounds of chemotherapy, lost her hair, and lost a significant amount of weight, but ultimately triumphed over the disease. After her treatment, she quickly recovered, continued working, and used wigs to cover her hair loss. Romina believed that after enduring such difficult challenges, a period of happiness was on the horizon. She saved money and planned to take her eldest son, along with her mother and sister, on a trip to Spain. In the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends where she met a man named Raul Diaz. He was attractive, impressive, had a stable job, and was financially secure. Raul was drawn to Romina's beauty and began asking mutual friends about her. Romina was equally interested in Raul, and when he invited her on a date, she happily accepted. Raul was nearly 15 years older than Romina and worked as a lead process engineer at a large energy company. He had been through 2 divorces and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships, but Romina was not bothered by the age gap. Similarly, she was also a single mother, raising sons from her own 2 past relationships. After just one date, they quickly realized they were in love and didn't want to be apart. Romina, filled with excitement, enthusiastically shared her happiness with friends. Her new partner showered her with small gifts and thoughtful surprises nearly every day, organized romantic outings, sent flowers with heartfelt messages, and offered her compliments. Romina felt she had finally found true love and a man who would accept her and her sons. However, she soon began to hear unsettling rumors about him. People claimed that he had been rude and even cruel to his former wives, which had led to the end of both his marriages. Despite this, Romina didn't want to believe the rumors, although she noticed that Raul had no contact with either his ex-wives or his daughters. Despite their significant age difference and the presence of children from previous relationships, the couple did not let these factors stand in their way. Just 6 months after they met, they chose to move in together in a luxurious villa on Lanzarote, one of the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place felt like paradise, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, who initially seemed like the perfect partner, soon revealed a controlling side. At first, they lived with Romina's youngest son, and Raul made an effort to take care of the child. Romina even believed he would be a great father to her boys. Raul promised her a long and happy life together, assuring her that he would take care of her and the children. Romina, deeply in love, trusted his words and eagerly accepted his proposal to marry him. However, Raul insisted they needed time alone together to fully enjoy their relationship before the wedding. Raul not only wanted to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but he also hoped to distance himself from her youngest son. Despite this, Romina trusted her partner and ignored warnings from her friends who noticed his odd behavior. In June 2018, Raul purchased tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, along with a return ticket solely for Romina. When she returned home and shared details about her partner, her mother and sister became uneasy about Raul's intentions. They suspected he simply wanted to get rid of her children. Romina was hurt by their comments and ended up having a small argument with her family. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising to return for the boys in the fall. When Romina got back, she received a warm welcome, and for 2 months, she was happily alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, Raul violently attacked Romina. This was a shocking experience for her, but he pleaded for her forgiveness on his knees, assuring her that it would never happen again, and she chose to believe him. Romina did not report the incident or tell anyone about it. On August 10th, she attended the wedding with makeup covering her bruises, unaware that the man she was marrying would soon take her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl returned to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had initially planned, but to visit her family. Her mother and sister were confused by the changes they noticed in her since they last saw each other. Romina appeared upset and disoriented. She walked with a noticeable limp and had bruises on her neck, which she tried to cover with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina either remained silent or claimed she had hurt herself accidentally. She stayed at home for nearly a month, which surprised her relatives since she had just gotten married. Romina explained that her husband had suggested she visit her children because she missed them. Miriam praised her son-in-law for being generous, but she still couldn't understand why her daughter seemed so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina secretly borrowed money from her relatives to buy a return ticket to Spain because her husband refused to pay for it. This should have been a clear sign that returning was not a good idea, yet Romina still hoped for a happy resolution to their marriage. On September 17th, at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. After returning to her husband, Romina's life began to feel like a nightmare. Raul, who was using illegal drugs, no longer hid his addiction from her. When under the influence, he became aggressive and emotionally abused Romina. Each time she tried to leave, he promised to change and insisted that it wouldn't happen again. After the beatings and threats, there were often brief periods when Romina's husband would become loving and caring again, showering her with gifts and planning romantic outings. However, these peaceful moments became shorter over time, and instances of violence occurred more frequently. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend that she feared her husband and worried he might eventually kill her. On December 29th, Raul beat her so severely that she had to seek medical attention. The hospital staff noticed something was wrong and considered calling the police to report the incident. At that moment, Raul arrived and insisted that Romina had simply fallen and that there was no need to involve the authorities. Romina went along with his story, declined hospitalization, and returned home with him. On January 1, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, repeatedly tried to call her daughter, but Romina did not answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her son-in-law to check on Romina, but he also did not answer. After several days of no contact, Miriam sent Raul a message indicating she would go to the police for help. This prompted Raul to quickly return her call, explaining that he and Romina had a fight on December 31st, after which she left with her belongings. He reassured Miriam that Romina would be okay and would return home soon, as this had happened before. Miriam, however, doubted Raúl's explanation and felt something was wrong with her daughter. She insisted that Raúl report the situation to the police. Finally, on January 8, pressured by Romina's family, Raúl reported her disappearance. This time, he altered his story slightly, claiming that after their quarrel, Romina had taken some money from him and suggested that she might have gone to Paraguay to see the children, which is why he was not too worried before he heard from Miriam. What was Raúl hiding? His testimony was filled with confusion and contradictions, raising many questions and suspicions. As a result, law enforcement decided to investigate the couple's life. After speaking with friends and family, they discovered that the marriage was far from perfect. Romina had often complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, though she never provided details. Others frequently noticed bruises and injuries on her body. The police decided to place Raúl under covert surveillance, tapping his phone conversations. However, Raúl seemed to sense that he was being monitored and acted very cautiously, avoiding any behavior that might raise suspicion. Despite this, the investigation continued, and it was soon revealed that Romina had visited the hospital on December 29 with signs of severe beating. Her husband almost forcibly took her from the hospital, preventing her from going to the police. A few months ago, Romina filed a report for domestic violence but retracted it the following day. A week later, Raúl, having calmed down somewhat, made a phone call to a relative in the police and carelessly mentioned that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This statement prompted police to arrest him as the primary suspect and interrogate him thoroughly. Raúl claimed that on New Year's Eve, his wife had been drinking heavily and started to argue with him. She demanded that he bring their children to live with them. When he said he wasn't ready for that, she had a violent outburst, started fighting, and began throwing things at him. Raúl stated that he left his house for a few hours until things calmed down. Upon returning, he discovered Romina in the bathtub, unresponsive. He suggested that she had suffocated due to excessive drinking but was worried he might be suspected of her death or accused of murder. To protect himself, Raúl decided to erase all evidence and report her as missing. Everyone was shocked by his admission of how he disposed of her body. He claimed he burned Romina's body on a barbecue in the backyard. Living in a luxury complex with a spacious area, he thought the neighbors wouldn't notice what he was doing or smell the burning flesh. However, he underestimated the situation because the barbecue did not function like a crematorium, and her remains were not fully burned after several hours. He then removed the body from the fire, cut it into parts, and put the pieces into separate bags. A few days later, he rented a car to transport the dismembered body to a remote and desolate area of the island, where he discarded the bags into the sea from the cliffs. The police spent weeks searching the shoreline and surrounding areas based on Raúl's statements about where he had thrown his wife's remains. Divers and many volunteers participated in the search for body fragments underwater, but none of their efforts produced any findings. Meanwhile, on January 16, Raúl was officially charged with domestic violence and the murder of his wife. This development followed a detailed search of his home, which utilized specialized equipment and luminol. This search uncovered multiple traces of washed blood in different rooms. Investigators discovered that Raúl had been ordering caustic soda online, a substance used for removing organic materials and paint. In one of the second-floor rooms, he had scrubbed a bloody stain on the floor so aggressively that he damaged it and then attempted to cover it up with paint. According to investigators, this is the room where Raúl dismembered his wife's body. Additionally, a broken piece of Romina's fingernail was found on the floor, which had traces of blood and Raúl's skin cells, suggesting that she may have been alive and fought back during the incident. Also in the bathroom, investigators discovered Romina's contact lens stuck to the wall, possibly from a strong impact to her face. Despite extensive searching, law enforcement could not find any other remains. Meanwhile, a tourist called to report a lung fragment he found on the beach. He was unsure if it was from a human or an animal, but knowing that authorities were looking for a body in the area, he reported his discovery. By the end of February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung fragment belonged to Romina. Raul continued to claim his innocence despite the evidence and examination results. He maintained his original belief that the woman had drowned in a bathtub while heavily intoxicated, even though evidence suggested there had been a violent struggle. He also stated that he did not use any tools to dismember the body. Instead, he claimed to have tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, asserting that the remains fell apart due to the heat, and he then placed them in bags to dispose of. This account was false for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have fit in the fixture in his yard. Second, bones cannot become so fragile from fire that they fall apart without tools. Additionally, separating the lung from the body would require opening the chest, which cannot be done with bare hands. The investigation could not determine exactly how Raul killed his wife, but the evidence of a struggle in their home suggested that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to hide the blood. Eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he admitted that he accidentally killed his wife during a fight, contradicting his earlier claim that he found her dead in the bathtub. Despite his claims that she was drunk and violent, the defendant was found guilty in June 2023. Romina's family felt the sentence was too lenient. He received a 12.5-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for confirmed domestic violence, and 1 year for causing serious bodily harm to Romina in December 2018 when she was hospitalized. He also received several months for bodily abuse. In total, the combined punishment was less than 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence while simultaneously trying to appeal the court's decision. The story of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the complex struggles faced by individuals seeking a better life. Despite her resilience and efforts to overcome adversity, Romina became a victim of a controlling and abusive relationship, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. The court's lenient verdict against her perpetrator reflects the ongoing challenges in addressing domestic violence, leaving her family and loved ones grappling with their loss and advocating for justice. As we reflect on Romina's case, it is crucial to continue raising awareness about the importance of supporting victims and holding abusers accountable to prevent such tragedies in the future. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California, USA. Her family included her father Mark, mother Eva, and younger sister Annie. After her parents' divorce when she was very young, Polly and Annie lived with their mother in Petaluma, California. As for Mark, he had a new relationship after the divorce, and Polly got along very well with this woman. Overall, their family was very harmonious, and she spent time with both her mother and father, with no problems between them. Polly was a quiet and innocent child who had a few close friends but was generally very shy. However, she found confidence and joy in theater, participating in various school plays and community musicals where she often took the lead role. Her main aspiration is to become a talented musical theater actress. Aside from theater, Polly loves hosting and attending sleepovers with her friends, a regular activity shared among her close-knit group. On October 1, 1993, Polly asked her mother if she could have 2 friends, Jillian and Kate, over for a sleepover. Her mother agreed, and the 2 friends arrived at Polly's house in the afternoon. They had dinner together, and the evening went smoothly until Polly's mother went to bed around 9:45 p.m. due to a bad headache. She told the girls that she was going to sleep and asked them to wake her up if they needed any help at any time. After taking 2 sleeping pills, she fell into a deep sleep. The calm night was disrupted after 11 p.m. when Eva, Polly's mother, was jolted awake by the screams of Jillian and Kate. The 2 girls frantically told her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly away. Eva made an emergency call to the police and then went to check on her other daughter, Annie, who was in her room, seemingly unaware of the incident. When the police arrived, they started questioning Polly's 2 friends, Jillian and Kate. The girls explained they were in a room, select on a Halloween costume and just having fun. As the night wore on, around 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was time to go to bed, and her friends agreed. She offered to get the inflatable bed she and her mom had set up earlier so the 3 could sleep together. However, when Polly opened the door to her room, a man was standing in front of them, holding a knife and not wearing a mask. Since Halloween approached, 3 girls initially thought man's threatening claims were a prank and burst into laughter. However, the man's facial expression quickly turned to anger, causing them to realize the situation was more serious. He swiftly forcing the girls into a room, where he bound their hands and feet with rope. When questioned about who lived in the house, all 3 girls, including Jillian and Kate, provided the same answer: Polly. Next, the man removed the pillowcases from the pillows and placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, preventing them from seeing. He instructed the girls to count up to 1,000, assuring them that he would temporarily take Polly away but return her shortly. Unbeknownst to the man, the girls peered through gaps in the pillowcases and noticed his swift departure. Then, they attempted to release themselves from the restraints. After about 30 minutes of struggle, they managed to break free. Upon escaping the room, they immediately sought out Eva to inform her that her daughter Polly had been taken by the man. Jillian and Kate provided the police with a detailed account of the events. They also gave a brief description of the man, who had not worn a mask and covered his face, allowing the girls to get a clear look at him. As a result, the police were able to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. The investigation at Polly's house did not yield much evidence. Several footprints were found, but they all belonged to Polly, her family members, or friends who had visited the house recently. However, some unusual fibers were discovered on the carpet, which did not match the carpet in Polly's house. Further analysis revealed that these fibers likely came from the carpet of a vehicle. The police then analyzed the cars of individuals who were known to the family and had visited the house, but none of them matched the fibers. This led to the assumption that the fibers were from the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was discovered at the scene. At that time, fingerprinting and DNA technology had not yet advanced to the point where it could be compared to a database. However, the print was preserved for potential future use if a suspect was later identified. In Polly's room, a piece of fabric resembling silk was also found. The fabric had a distinctive pattern and appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors. The police believed this fabric could serve as a valuable clue in the future. A hair was discovered, but its origin remained unknown since DNA analysis was not advanced enough to thoroughly examine it at the time. Polly's case generated one of the largest searches in the United States at that time. Thousands of volunteers joined the search, with 4,000 people combing neighborhoods, vacant lots, and large estates near her home. The police also attempted to locate drivers matching the suspect's description, but all did not bring any results. The police had a narrow 24-hour window to locate Polly after her disappearance, as chances of finding her alive would significantly decrease beyond that time frame. To expedite the investigation, they handed the case over to the FBI and launched an urgent search. However, as the days went by, hopes of a safe recovery Polly began to dwindle. During the investigation, Police inquired about witnesses in the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual on the night of the abduction. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the area, describing him as peculiar-looking. They didn't think much of it at the time because they had no reason to believe the man was capable of committing a serious crime like kidnapping. As a result, they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The police shared a sketch of the suspect with the neighbors, based on a description provided by Polly's friends. The neighbors all recognized the man in the sketch. In a separate investigation, the police also questioned the teachers and staff at Polly's school to see if anyone knew the man or had any information about Polly's disappearance. Unfortunately, no one at the school had any knowledge about the man or the incident surrounding Polly's disappearance. The staff members all had alibis for the time in question, and none of them matched the description or resembled the sketch of suspects. The police have conducted a thorough and comprehensive investigation of the case, they comparing a fiber found in Polly's house to the car mats of teachers and school staff vehicles, but unfortunately, no matches were found. Over time, feelings of hopelessness and fear grew, not only for Polly's family but also for the authorities and the general public. Everyone is concerned about the threat this criminal may pose to society, so they demand that the police quickly solve the case. To gather more information, a $200,000 reward was offered to anyone providing information that could aid in locating Polly. This reward was funded by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference to publicly appeal kidnapper for Polly's safe return. At the time, the internet was still in its early stages, and law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were unfamiliar with using the internet to locate missing persons. To assist in the investigation, 3 individuals from California took matters into their own hands. They created and posted a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and an advertisement for a reward for any information that could lead to her safe return. Although social media platforms did not exist at the time, other online communication tools were available. As a result, approximately 25 million people in the United States viewed Polly's picture online. Initially, FBI investigators believed that the internet could play a crucial role in the investigation. Although the disappearance became increasingly well known, but internet users do not bring any valuable information. However, this has attracted many volunteers to help, and telephone switchboards were established with hundreds of information every day. This thing also brings hope in the families of other missing children, who reached out to Polly's family to support and assistance, hoping that by working together, they might be able to find their own missing children. The investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. It has been many weeks since Polly was kidnapped, and they had yet to uncover any leads. The identity of the kidnapper remained a mystery, and without any DNA evidence, they were unable to make a match. Not even a hair or palm print had been left found, leaving them feeling helpless. Finally, a new breakthrough in the case has come. A phone call was called to Polly's father, Mark. On the other end of the line, he heard a girl's voice that sounded uncannily like his daughter's. She claimed to be Polly and told Mark that she was being held at a hotel. The kidnapper had momentarily left her alone, and that's why she was able to contact he. However, before Mark could glean any more information, the girl hung up. Mark immediately rushed to the police station to tell the news. Unfortunately, the FBI at the time lacked the advanced technology to track a call that had already been disconnected. All they could do was wait anxiously for the kidnapper to make another move, so they can only sit and wait for a new call, hoping to trace it. A few hours after the first call, the same girl who had spoken to Mark called again. The police managed to trace the call, but found it odd that the location was not a hotel, as the girl claimed, but a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived and knocked on the door of the house where the call originated, they discovered it was a prank. It turned out a teenage girl, close to Polly's age, lived there, so their voices were similar. She explained that her friends had dared her to do it. The girl was not arrested or taken to the police station. Instead, her parents were advised to monitor her behavior and remind her not to joke about such serious issues. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly disappeared, police received a call from a woman. She reported that she found 3 suspicious items on a several-acre plot of land she owned. The police, along with the FBI, went to the location and found 3 critical pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to one in Polly's room, a pair of ballet shoes that Eva claimed were missing from the house the night Polly vanished, and some duct tape. These evidence led the police to suspect that Polly might have been in the area. Before all this evidence was discovered, on the day Polly disappeared, the same woman went to the police to report a problem. Strangers had been wandering onto her plot of land. She owned a lot of land, which was mostly forest, and had only one small house inside. Although there were signs indicating it was private property, there was no fence to keep people out, so many unknowingly crossed onto her land. Although her land had many intruders, but one particular out in her memory. On the night Polly was abducted, a man drove up to her house in his car, which got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, was the first to notice the man but didn't approach him because she was too scared. The homeowner also didn't approach him, as she thought he looked angry. They decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they interrogated the man about why he was there. He explained that he hadn't realized it was private property and promised to leave quickly. However, he requested their assistance in getting his car out of the mud. The officers noticed that the man seemed very nervous, scared, and sweaty, and he also appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Since they were unable to conduct a drug test at the time and the man was not acting aggressively, they were unable to arrest him. The officers helped him out of the mud, and he eventually drove away. This man was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was troubled due to the violence inflicted by his parents. When he was 12, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him, saying she wanted nothing to do with him, and left him with his father. Richard's father was very irresponsible, often leaving the house for hours or even days. Richard was frequently left alone, sometimes staying with neighbors and sometimes staying with some of his relatives. During his teenage years, Richard began engaging in criminal activities such as stealing and fighting, which led to several months in reform school. At 17, Richard committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the victim's death. The judge offered him a choice: go to reform school or join the U.S. Army. Richard chose the Army but was dishonorably discharged in less than 2 years. As he grew older, his criminal record grew longer. Around the age of 20, he was sentenced to 15 years for robbery and kidnapping, but was released after 1 year on parole for good behavior. During that period, Richard was troubled by another accusation. Many of his friends suspected him of killing a 19-year-old girl named Marlene, even though the police acknowledged that she had left voluntarily. However, those close to Marlene believed Richard was responsible for her death, occurring the night they attended a party together. These were merely rumors, with no evidence to support them. When Polly went missing, Richard was having a difficult time, and he had no fixed address, so his whereabouts were unclear. The police distributed a special leaflet exclusively to officers, urging them to be extremely cautious. They withheld information from the media due to concerns that Richard might flee California or even the United States. On November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol. A police officer stopped him, and he failed a breathalyzer test. Upon checking Richard's name and picture, the officer recognized him as the suspect wanted in the Polly kidnapping case. The officer carefully informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating probation due to drunk driving. Richard complied and was taken to the police station. There, officers read him his rights and revealed that he was actually being held for the kidnapping of Polly. Richard was taken in for questioning. The investigation was careful and he eventually admitted to kidnapping Polly. His palm print matched exactly with the one found at Polly's house, and carpet fibers from his car matched those found in the house. Polly's friends were brought to the police station for questioning and immediately identified Richard as the kidnapper. Additionally, a piece of silk identical to one found in Polly's room was discovered in his car and on the piece of land of the woman who reported the incident to the police. All evidence pointed to Richard, leading he to finally confess. He explained that he had been using substances with friends that day and felt unwell. He decided to break into a house in a neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around until he reached Polly's neighborhood. Seeing an open window, he entered the house. He stated that he hadn't planned the incident, didn't know Polly or her family, and hadn't been following them. He was searching for valuables but didn't find much. As he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard noted that she was very frightened and, in his panic, decided to take her. He stated that he put Polly in his car and started driving, eventually stopping in a vacant lot where he assaulted her. Afterwards, he got back into the driver's seat. When the woman and the babysitter spotted Richard on private piece of land, Polly was in the back seat. Police officers helped him retrieve his car from the mud, and at that point, Polly was still alive, which deeply frustrated officers as they believed her life could have been saved. After the car was pushed out of the mud, Richard drove down the highway, strangled Polly to death, and left her body there. Richard reported the exact location of the grave to the police, leading to a search that took place on December 4, 1993, 2 months 3 days after the girl was abducted. Polly's body was found in a grave beside the highway, dug by Richard himself. The forensic examination mainly confirmed the cause of death as strangulation, consistent with Richard's account. The date of her death was approximately the same day she disappeared. With all the evidence, Richard Allen Davis was put on trial for kidnapping, murdering, and raping Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. Besides apologizing to the family, he accused Polly's father of sexually abusing her. Richard claimed that Polly had told him not to do to her what her father did to her. This accusation enraged Polly's father, who nearly attacked Richard, but the people present compartmented him. Richard's words shocked everyone, not only because he didn't apologize but also because they doubted the truth of his claim about Polly's father. On June 18, 1996, Richard Allen Davis was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Polly Klaas. In August, he was sentenced to death. He tried to overturn the death sentence but failed. In 2006, Richard overdosed on pills in his cell but was revived and returned to prison. In 2009, his lawyer attempted to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kelly Dwyer. Kelly Dwyer was born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago, to a loving family. In 2002, when Kelly was 16, her parents decided to divorce, but they remained on friendliness terms for her sake. The divorce was a traumatic incident that significantly impacted her life. A year later, she graduated from high school, but she unsure of her future plans. She took a break before college and worked part-time at a restaurant. In 2008, at 22, Kelly made a big decision to move to another city to start a new life. She chose Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was about an hour from Chicago and reminded her of her hometown. The city was the largest in Wisconsin in terms of population, offering great opportunities. Kelly quickly made new friends, attended college, and got a job as a yoga instructor to pay for her tuition and accommodation. She also worked occasionally as a babysitter to tackle financial difficulties. As a child, Kelly loved visiting all the trendy, interesting, and popular places in the city. She enjoyed her life new and was making big plans for the future. The last time Kelly saw her father was a month before she disappeared, when he visited her in Milwaukee. At that time, Kelly had graduated and was working as a yoga instructor and sales clerk in a sports store. Her friends and co-workers admired her upbeat and fun personality. Kelly appeared to be happy and content with her life. She loved her job and had been in a relationship with Chris Sacco for a year. Chris was a 38-year-old successful IT manager at a trucking company. He graduated from Boston University in 2009 with a degree in international business. He had moved from New York City to Milwaukee for his job. Chris was a hardworking, decent person and have a good family. Both Kelly and Chris shared a love for sports and entertainment, seemed they like a perfect couple. Chris was already enjoying a successful career, a luxurious apartment, an expensive car, and a reasonable fortune that he had earned independently. During the investigation, detectives found that Kelly had no enemies or anyone wishing her harm. All her belongings were left at home, which ruled out the possibility of her running away. What was troubling was the complete lack of activity on her bank accounts and phone. This led police to speculate that she might be in danger. The last person to see her on October 10, 2013, was her boyfriend Chris, so the investigators asked him to come to the station for an interrogation. Chris explained that they met at his luxury apartment in Lafayette Towers, spent some time there, and left around 8 p.m. They then went to a small bar across the street from his apartment, where Chris and Kelly mingled with others and enjoyed a drink. In good spirits, they returned to his apartment around 2:30 a.m. and went to bed. Kelly left at 9 a.m., and they never saw each other again. Chris emphasized that he did not consider Kelly his girlfriend. They had an open relationship, and he was truly in love with another woman. This made the investigators curious. While Chris's story seemed quite believable, something about his words and behavior was suspicious, prompting the police to scrutinize him more closely. Detectives interviewed friends who were with Chris and Kelly that night. The friends confirmed that they all had a great time together. First, they went to the bar, and then they went outside, ordered a pizza because they were hungry, and ate it on a bench. Kelly was in a good mood and shared her plans for her day off, which included catching up on sleep, doing yoga, doing laundry, and resting. Later, Chris and Kelly went home, and they invited a friend over for another drink. The friend said she felt uncomfortable in Chris's apartment. She had a few drinks and later decided to leave. That night, Chris was smoking and chatting with a friend, while Kelly seemed a bit down. The friend thought Kelly was just tired and decided to leave the apartment to give them space. After speaking with Kelly's other girlfriends, the investigator discovered that the relationship between Chris and Kelly was not as good as it appeared. Kelly was genuinely in love with Chris, but he didn't seem as invested. Chris wasn't making any plans for a future together, which concerned Kelly. She suspected he might be having an affair and thought they might break up soon. As a result, Kelly felt there was no future with Chris and began looking for other options. She signed up for a dating site and began chatting with different guys, although she hadn't met them in person yet. Kelly's friends pointed out that they had seen bruises on her arms and neck. Curiously, when they asked about the bruises, Kelly always turned it into a joke, called it a crazy night, and immediately changed the subject. Her friends suspected these could be signs of violence, but Kelly never confirmed this thing. By that time, CCTV footage from Chris's house had been reviewed. It showed Chris and Kelly returning drunk to the apartment at night. But Kelly was never seen leaving. This footage contradicted Chris's claim that Kelly left his home at 9 a.m. the following morning. Turns out another friend of Chris had been in the apartment that night and said he'd done substances with Chris. With this information, the detectives got a search warrant for the apartment and went to Chris's house. Inside, they found various substances, pills, pipes, and other items, and arrested Chris for possession. The detectives also noticed something odd, a torn curtain in the bathroom. The curtain was missing, and the hooks where it hung were damaged, as if the curtain had been forcefully ripped off. During the interrogation, Chris appeared calm and confirmed that he had used substances, but he denied trading them. The police accessed Chris's cell phone and started investigating it. They found frightening materials, photos of a naked, unconscious girl on his bed, as well as a video of Chris sexually abusing the girl and seemingly strangling her. They suspicions that Chris was drugging the girl to take advantage of her. These materials were included as evidence in the case of Kelly's disappearance. The police went back to Chris's apartment with a cadaver-sniffing dog. The dog signaled at the bed and the bathroom in the apartment, and then pointed towards the front door. Later, it led the officers to Chris's car in the parking lot, as well as to some trash bins. By then, the investigators were already sure that the missing person was dead, and Chris became the main suspect in the case. She spent the last minutes of her life in his apartment, and then he took her body out and transported it in a car. It's still not known how Chris managed to discreetly get Kelly's body into the car without being caught by any of the 28 security cameras. While the police continued investigating, they checked Chris's computer and found explicit photos of babies. He was charged with possession of this material. At that time, Chris was out on bail awaiting trial, and investigators were still looking for evidence and Kelly's body to charge him. Remembering what Chris had told them about another girl he was secretly dating, detectives began to look into his double life. The young woman was named Megan, and she had been dating Chris for about 3 years. However, Megan doesn't know that Kelly is involved in Chris's life. The detectives went to talk to Megan and showed her photos of Chris's apartment. Upon examining them closely, Megan realized that some things were missing. In the bathroom, there was no shower curtain, rug, or several towels. In the bedroom, a large golf bag that was always kept there was missing. Based on the description, the detectives assumed that Kelly's body could have fit in such a bag. After reviewing all the building's entrances and exits, the police determined that Chris could have used an alternative path to reach the car without being seen. It seems he had thoroughly studied the house beforehand to plan this path. Parking lot camera footage captured Chris arriving with a large bag, which he placed in the trunk. He drove away from the house at 10:06 a.m. on October 11th, and at 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone was permanently disconnected at the same location. Over the following 8 hours, footage showed Chris returning to the house multiple times, loading items into his car, finally he leaving at 6:16 p.m. He did not come back until the next day. When investigators asked him about the items he was transporting, Chris claimed he was moving his summer sports equipment to his mother's house. However, no one believed his explanation. That day at 7:30 p.m., Chris was supposed to meet Megan. However, she reported that he was over an hour late. Detectives suspected that during this time, Chris was searching for a place to dispose of Kelly's body, which explained his tardiness. Tracking Chris's movements was impossible because his phone had been turned off since the morning. Being an experienced IT professional, Chris likely knew that keeping his phone on would make police it easy to trace his location through phone records. Megan testified that Chris was acting differently that night. He appeared agitated and nervous. He was fiddling with his phone and said it wasn't working, which made him late. After their date, they went to Megan's apartment and stayed the night. Chris was so stressed that he couldn't sleep and was sweating heavily, so much so that Megan had to change the sheets in the morning. The investigators believed Chris was anxious because Kelly's body was still in his trunk, making him fearful of being discovered. He was trying to find a place to hide Kelly's remains. On the morning of October 12th, he said goodbye to Megan and departed. Earlier, he had tried to persuade Megan to urgently move with him to another city, Denver, but she declined. The police officers tracked Chris's location using the car's GPS and found that he was heading to a place called Cheese House, a cheese store located 130 kilometers from Milwaukee. It seemed unusual for Chris to drive such a long distance early in the morning just to buy cheese. However, Chris claimed he went there to purchase cheese for his parents, and he even had a receipt showing a purchase at 9:55 a.m. on October 12th. His parents confirmed he had indeed brought them cheese. Still, it was hard to believe his story, because the same type of cheese could easily have been bought at a local supermarket nearby. The police suspected this area was where Chris had hidden Kelly's body. It was later revealed that Chris stopped at a sports store around noon on his way back and bought new sneakers, which raised suspicions. Detectives thought this was intentional. They believed Chris wanted to dispose of an old pair of shoes because it might have blood on them, or at the spot where he hid Kelly's body there may have been footprints from his old sneakers. Chris considered everything carefully and got rid of all the evidence, creating an alibi for himself. He is very good at analysis and wanted to commit the perfect crime, but the investigators were able to prove he was lying. The distance from the cheese store to the sports shop was about 80 kilometers, a trip he would have made in around an hour. So why did he show up at the store more than 2 hours later? All signs pointed to him doing something else for another hour, probably hiding the body. Police believe Chris hid the bag containing Kelly's body somewhere along the route and disposed of it there. The police were looking for Kelly, but without a specific location, the search was difficult and inconclusive. The entire 80 kilometers route was the search area, which was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Meanwhile, in November 2014, Chris Sacco went on trial for possessing illegal substances and explicit photos of children. He pleaded guilty and received a 19-year prison sentence. The roadside search continued, and they eventually succeeded. A local resident walking in a wooded area about 60 kilometers from the city discovered human remains near the road. Dental records later confirmed them as those of Kelly Dwyer. The resident quickly reported the discovery to the sheriff's office, who immediately suspected it was Kelly's body, which they had been searching for in that area for a long time. The discovery finally ended the search for Kelly, bringing some peace to her parents after a year and a half. Now, they needed to seek justice for her and determine the exact cause of death. The cause could not be identified from the skeleton alone. The medical examiner suggested that the girl might have been strangled, but the force was not strong enough, so the hyoid bone was not broken. There was no evidence at the location where the body was found, no torn curtain, mat, towels, or even a bag. However, the position of the body was unusual. The skeleton was found face down, with one arm under the torso, and the legs bent, suggesting the body had been in a narrow space for some time after death. This further confirmed that Kelly had been hidden in that golf bag. Chris was seen on his home cameras with the bag and also driving down the road with it, disposing of the body, but all of this was circumstantial evidence. There was no direct proof that Chris had committed the crime, so the detectives continued to investigate the case. They were not in a rush because he was already in jail. It was not until 5 years after Kelly's disappearance that he was finally charged. The charges were negligent homicide and hiding the body. The police could not prove that the murder was planned in advance. They believed that on that night, the situation was similar to what investigators found in a video. Chris became intimate with her, lost control during strangulation, and accidentally killed her. He then tore down the bathroom curtain, rug, and towels, wrapped the body, put it in a bag, thoroughly cleaned the house, and disposed of the body. Chris claimed he was innocent of Kelly's murder. During the trial, CCTV footage was shown, along with a video from Chris's cell phone capturing the strangulation, and evidence from a canine inspection of his apartment was presented. Megan, who testified against him, stated he was unusually nervous and late for a meet on that day. Chris's ex-girlfriends also testified, saying he had a disturbing fascination with choking and rough sex, which frightened them. The defense argued that there was no direct evidence against Chris and that the prosecution judge was based on speculation. They highlighted that Chris had no previous arrests or convictions, except for a substance possession case. He was a successful IT professional and valued employee with a respectable family, and they contended he was not capable of murder. Not all CCTV recordings were preserved before the trial, so the prosecution couldn't prove for sure that Kelly hadn't left the house. The defense even brought forward a witness during the trial who claimed to have seen a girl who looked like Kelly the weekend after she disappeared, in another man's car. They had seen her picture on TV as a missing person, but the witness wasn't completely sure it was her. All of this led the lawyer to hypothesize that Kelly left Chris' apartment and was then set up by one of her new boyfriends met through the dating website. The defense counsel argued that there is no way to confirm what exactly the dog detected because there is no video recording. As a result, which could be subjective. In contrast, the prosecution countered that the observe was conducted as objectively as possible, with many police officers present, and they all agreed on the results. At that time, Kelly had already stopped communicating, was not answering calls or messages, and was not active on social media, which was unusual for her, suggesting she was already dead. The prosecutor persuaded the jury that Chris was responsible for the murder. Chris was the only one who could have done it, and he cleverly planned everything and disposed of the evidence, leaving no direct proof of his involvement. The jury deliberated for a long time but ultimately found Chris Sacco guilty of first-degree negligent homicide and concealing the body. Kelly's family and the prosecution requested the maximum sentence of 48 years in prison, while the defense attorney asked for the sentence to be reduced to 22 years. In December 2018, Chris Sacco, aged 43, was sentenced to 31 years in prison, 26 years for manslaughter and 5 years for concealing the body. He is currently held at the Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin. He will be eligible for parole in 2065 at the age of 90. Chris attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeals were denied. Kelly's family is satisfied with the sentence, as it effectively means he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chloe and Aubrey Berry. Wack-BJ is a small coastal settlement in Canada with a population of under 20,000 people. It is an ideal place for starting a family with a united, quiet, safe, but still well-developed community. On December 25, 2017, the town was alive with the Christmas spirit. The windows of the apartments along the street sparkled with colorful lights, and homes were beautifully decorated. However, the festive atmosphere was disrupted by the flashing lights of police cars responding to a tragic incident. Sarah worked for the local ferry service, which connected the mainland with coastal areas and several nearby islands for communication and cargo deliveries. She studied at the University of Victoria and completed an internship for this position. Prior to this, she worked in the public relations group. She was active and energetic in everything she pursued, which brought her success. Her relationship with Andrew blossomed quickly after they met, and they soon took their relationship to the next level. They got married and started a family, welcoming their daughter Chloe in 2013. 2 years later, they gave birth to their second daughter, Aubrey. At the beginning of their relationship, the love of young couple Sarah and Andrew seemed sincere and sweet. However, the pressures of daily life began to take a toll on their bond. After the family has children, their relationship deteriorated significantly. To make matters worse, Sarah faced the heartbreak of losing her father in a car accident. All of these things caused Andrew's behavior to change a lot. He became anxious, prone to outbursts over minor issues, and often directed verbal insults at Sarah. It was clear that Sarah's father had previously helped control Andrew's temper, but now that support was gone. As a consequence, Andrew's aggressiveness increased. Initially, Sarah attempted to resolve conflicts and kept their issues private, hoping this tough time would pass. Unfortunately, matters only worsened. During a tense argument over custody of her two daughters, Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew made serious threats, claiming that he would harm the entire family if the situation did not change. Sarah was deeply troubled by these threats, and Andrew's anger became increasingly uncontrollable. Andrew's behavior became erratic and dangerous. When he got angry, he drove recklessly, creating hazardous situations on the road. At first, he tried not to act like that when his daughter was there, but he eventually lost control and engaged in these antics even with the daughter in the car. It is clear that this marriage was once a happy one, but now it has become seriously dangerous for Sarah and her daughter, who were growing up in a hostile and unsafe environment. Despite this, Sarah made efforts to maintain the marriage. Months went by until Sarah reached her breaking point. She decided to end the relationship and told Andrew directly that he needed to move out that day. Instead of leaving calmly, Andrew has sparked another debate, barging into his wife's bedroom and trying to strangle her. Sarah managed to escape, grabbed her phone, and called the police. Andrew continued his aggressive behavior until the police arrived, clearly displaying his violent nature. He was quickly arrested and taken to the police station. After this episode, Sarah obtained a restraining order, preventing Andrew from approaching her or their children. This brought a sense of relief to the family, as Andrew was now under control. He moved into his own apartment and lived alone, while Sarah took care of their two daughters. She worked hard and often worked overtime to earn money to raise her children. Meanwhile, her mother also helps take care of the children while she is at work. During this time, Sarah and Andrew finalized their divorce, and Sarah was awarded full custody of their children. Because of his aggressive behavior, Andrew lost his visitation rights and was ordered to pay alimony. For 3 months, Sarah focused entirely on her daughters, giving them her love and attention. However, everything shifted when Andrew returned, saying he missed his daughters and wanted to meet with them. Sarah refused his request, and he was unable to see the children. At that point, Andrew seemed to have changed. With the help of a lawyer and witness testimonies, he wanted to protest the court's decision to grant custody of the child. Amendments were made to the court order, allowing him to see his daughters on weekends. He was proud that he now had official permission to meet with them. Sarah was responsible for bringing the girls Aubrey and Chloe to meet their father, Andrew, and she made sure to supervise their visits. During these times, Andrew was able to connect well with his daughters. Unfortunately, this was just the start of a tragedy. A few years later, issues arose concerning alimony and the shared ownership of the house. The court ordered Andrew to pay a large amount in alimony. Meanwhile, there were ongoing discussions about how to divide the jointly owned house for the benefit of their children. Andrew, the young father, refused to contribute any money towards the house. Consequently, the court allowed Sarah to buy Andrew's share of the property, valued at $60,000, for only $20,000, after deducting the alimony debt. The agreement means that Sarah will have full ownership of the house and will no longer be able to claim maintenance payments. Sarah accepted these terms. However, Andrew opposed this arrangement and sought to contest the court's decision. During this time, he frequently took their daughters to spend time, as the court permitted him to do so without the presence of their mother or any guardianship authorities. Soon, Sarah began to notice increasingly concerning signs regarding her children. After Andrew returning them one day, she discovered a bruise-like mark on Aubrey's head. When she called Andrew, he explained that Aubrey had accidentally hit herself while playing. However, during a later conversation, Aubrey revealed that Andrew had attempted to touch her inappropriately. Andrew dismissed the accusation as absurd, but Sarah believed her daughter. Determined to protect her children, she contacted Child Protection Services. An investigation was launched, and during this time, Andrew's interactions with Chloe and Aubrey were closely monitored. Although Sarah and Aubrey expressed concerns, law enforcement and Child Protection Services found no evidence of any misconduct by Andrew, leading them to close the case. Andrew insisted that Aubrey's bruise was caused by her falling, which appeared plausible since he stated he had accidentally bumped into her during a game. Sarah argued that Andrew posed a danger to their daughters, Aubrey va Chloe. She noted that he had previously exhibited strange and suspicious behavior, and the daughters were often reluctant to spend time with him. In an effort to protect her children, Sarah attempted to restrict Andrew's visits. In late 2016, she once again questioned his ability to care for them after he left Aubrey alone in a stroller in a public area while he walked away. Furthermore, Sarah claimed that Andrew spoke badly about her in front of the children, which she thought was his way of trying to turn them against her. During the trial, Sarah and Andrew shared their accounts of the incident and presented their arguments. Ultimately, the situation remained unchanged. Aubrey va Chloe continued to live with Sarah, while Andrew was allowed to take them on holidays and weekends. The judge viewed Andrew as a caring father capable who could provide well for his daughters. The court concluded that Andrew's aggressive behavior was only temporary and linked to domestic issues, with no evidence of child abuse presented. Andrew was given another chance, and both he and Sarah received decisions that they must comply with so they can continue to communicate with 6-year-old daughter Chloe and 4-year-old daughter Aubrey. Chloe and Aubrey were bright, cheerful children with distinct personalities and interests. Chloe had just begun first grade at a local school, where she discovered her passion for horse riding, a skill her cousin had been teaching her since she was young. She also had a talent for art. Meanwhile, Aubrey was getting ready to start school. The sisters were full of energy and creativity, and they shared a close bond and a love for artistic activities. During the court hearings, the guardianship service assessed Sarah, the girl's mother, and found her to be an excellent parent. She worked hard to maintain a good relationship with her daughters, both during their time as a family and after the divorce. The judge required both Sarah and Andrew to complete special training courses, and Andrew was actively involved in the process. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to prevent a tragic outcome. According to the custody agreement, Aubrey va Chloe were scheduled to spend Christmas 2017 with their father, Andrew. They celebrated Sarah's birthday on December 21st at morning with the children, and then Sarah took Chloe and Aubrey to Andrew's apartment on Beach Drive. Andrew lived just steps from the marina, in an upscale part of the city with a view of the Pacific coast. However, he is facing many great difficulties, including a financial crisis. He had quit his job, lost his main source of income, and developed a gambling addiction. As a result, he was unable to pay alimony or even provide basic necessities for himself and the children. From the beginning, Sarah believed it was a mistake to take Aubrey and Chloe to see Andrew. A court order obligated her to do so, and failing to comply could lead to serious repercussions for her. Sarah was especially hesitant to let Aubrey and Chloe spend the Christmas holidays with him, as she felt it was unfair, but she felt she had no alternative. Sarah asked Andrew to leave the children with her for her birthday, but he immediately threatened to sue, so she was forced to comply. As Sarah approached Andrew's apartment, her anxiety intensified. She noticed from a distance that the lights in the windows were off. For several weeks, Aubrey va Chloe had shared that during their visits with Andrew, they enjoyed using flashlights as if they were camping, which they found entertaining. Sarah was aware that Andrew had left his job in May and are having a lot of financial difficulties, which might explain why the electricity had been cut off. To avoid making the situation more tense and affect the children's vacation, she decided not to talk about the issue with Andrew and the children right away. However, She planned to address it later, as she was looking for ways to restrict Andrew meet to Aubrey va Chloe. When saying goodbye to Aubrey va Chloe, Sarah was understood that they would stay with Andrew until noon on December 25th, after which he was expected to return them. Upon returning home, Sarah noticed that Chloe had forgotten her favorite stuffed toy. She took the toy and brought it to Chloe. When she knocked on the window of Andrew's apartment, both Aubrey va Chloe appeared at the blinds in their holiday outfits, smiling and looking happy. This made Sarah feel a bit more at ease. She gave the daughters the toy and left, anticipating that she would see them again in a few days. On Christmas morning, Sarah woke up in a surprisingly quiet house and began her usual chores to pass the time until Aubrey va Chloe returned. During this time, she cleaned the house, decorated for the holiday, and placed presents under the tree, all in an effort to make the daughters happy. By 2 p.m., Sarah's parents arrived, but she was starting to worry because Aubrey va Chloe had not yet returned from Andrew's house. Andrew was supposed to return Aubrey and Chloe by noon, but Sarah had called and texted him several times without getting a response. She then tried to contact Andrew's sister, but she also ignored Sarah's calls and messages. Growing more worried, Sarah decided to go look for the children with her mother, leaving her father at home in case Andrew arrived with the daughters. When Sarah and her mother arrived at Andrew's apartment, Aubrey va Chloe were no longer at the window. Inside, the place felt eerily quiet and empty. Sarah couldn't see what was happening through the blinds. She knocked and shouted at the window, but there was no response, which only increased her fear. In desperation, they decided to speak with the neighbors. One neighbor mentioned that he had heard the children talking early in the morning and, closer to midday, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. Initially, he thought nothing of it, but now it seemed suspicious. He also noted that he hadn't seen any strangers near the building. Alarmed, Sarah and her mother quickly contacted the police to report Aubrey va Chloe's disappearance. When the first police officer arrived at the scene, he attempted to contact Andrew, the apartment's owner, but received no answer, just as no one responded to Sarah's screams. The officer then tried to open the door and discovered it was not locked. Inside, the lights were off, and flipping the switch had no effect. It became clear that Andrew's electricity and water had been cut off due to unpaid utility bills, and he was facing eviction. Using a flashlight, the officer was met with a shocking sight that resembled a horror movie scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, including the ceiling, prompting him to immediately call for backup. The police officers cautiously, weapons drawn, aware that the killer responsible for the horrific massacre might still be inside. They followed a bloody footprint to the bathroom, where they discovered Andrew, who was naked and severely injured with multiple wounds to his chest. He was still breathing, but each breath seemed increasingly difficult. In the next room, they found Chloe on the bed. She was already dead. Her body showed numerous cuts and bruises, indicating she had been beaten with a blunt object. Nearby, a bloody baseball bat lay on the floor among her clothes. Aubrey was found in a similar state as Chloe, dressed in blood-soaked pajamas, with splatters even on the ceiling. Both children Aubrey va Chloe had suffered multiple lacerations and stab wounds, similar to those found on their father, Andrew. The police checked Aubrey va Chloe's pulses several times, but they were confirmed dead. An ambulance quickly arrived to assist Andrew. Due to the cramped space in the bathroom, he was placed on a stretcher and prepared to be carried out of the apartment. At that moment, he regained consciousness, looked at the medics, and simply asked them to end his life. Andrew was taken to hospital with other police officers, and they hoped to question him once his health has stabilized. Meanwhile, they informed Sarah that both of her daughters, Aubrey va Chloe, were dead. Overcome with grief, she screamed hysterically and desperately tried to enter the apartment. Sarah had many questions, and so did the investigators, about the brutal murders of her 2 young children on Christmas Day. She believed she knew the answer: their father had killed them. Given the severity of the injuries, Andrew quickly became the primary suspect. Sarah warned that he was a danger to himself and Aubrey va Chloe due to the nature of the wounds. The police thought he might be more willing to talk while in the hospital, as they often obtained truthful confessions in such situations. Therefore, they wanted to interview Andrew to uncover what had happened to the children and to him. The police suspected Andrew had harmed Aubrey va Chloe, defenseless children, and after realizing the gravity of his actions, he might have attempted to end his life. Aubrey va Chloe's bodies were so severely damaged that the expert believed he first killed Chloe, then he killed Aubrey. Chloe suffered multiple severe head injuries from a baseball bat, which led to a fractured skull. Additionally, she had 26 stab wounds. Some of her wounds were inflicted before her death, while others occurred posthumously. The cause of death was identified as blood loss. Aubrey's situation was tragically severe. She had 32 stab wounds, leading to fatal blood loss. The medical examiner determined that the attacker had flipped the children over twice to stab them in both the front and back. He appeared to be enraged and intended to ensure that the girls would not survive Christmas. Meanwhile, forensic investigators thoroughly examined the apartment and discovered men's jeans and a blood-soaked t-shirt, both belonging to Andrew. A knife, clearly the murder weapon, was also located at the scene. The amount of blood in the apartment was so much that a team of experts was called in to assist in the investigation. Experts discovered many signs that there were efforts to clean up the scene, including fingerprints on the knife and patterned socks. Blood traces were even found in the refrigerator, indicating that the perpetrator had rummaged through it after the attack. In one of the rooms, a note addressed to his sister was found. In this note, Andrew expressed a long list of disappointments about his difficulties with Sarah, and felt misunderstood by the woman he loved deeply. He conveyed a sense of betrayal and recounted the many struggles he faced during his marriage and after his divorce. According to his confession, the only source of happiness in his life was his children, which led him to decide to end their lives together. It was clearly a suicide note. After investigating the crime scene, the police concluded that Andrew had attacked and brutally killed his children, Aubrey, 4 years old, and Chloe, 6 years old. Following the incident, he entered the bathroom and attempted to harm himself, believing these injuries would also result in his death. However, doctors assessed that none of his self-inflicted wounds were life-threatening, so he survived. Andrew soon regained his composure and was placed under medical supervision, where he admitted to self-harm. After receiving treatment, he was arrested and charged with double murder. When Andrew was taken to the police station, Sarah was already there with her parents. The police believed that Andrew had harmed the children, and he confessed to his actions, which caused Sarah to burst into tears. She had to be taken away from the station because she was inconsolable. It is hard to imagine her despair and grief, especially since she had tried desperately to protect her daughters from their father. Despite filing complaints with Child Protection Services and taking legal action, Sarah could not provide evidence to prove that Andrew was a danger, and her claims were not believed. Tragically, her daughters were killed by their father. The case received widespread attention and many people held memorial services to honor Aubrey and Chloe, innocent girls who suffered. The public was outraged by Andrew's actions and expressed support for Sarah. This incident sparked a worldwide reevaluation of the child protection system and raised questions about the judge who deemed Andrew a father thoughtful and loving to his children. The judge's decision granted Andrew unsupervised access to Aubrey va Chloe, which ultimately resulted in their deaths. However, no disciplinary actions were taken against the judge or the Child Protection Service. The victims of the tragic massacre, Aubrey va Chloe, were cremated. During the investigation, the complicated relationship between Andrew and Sarah came to light. Andrew is having a lot of trouble with his finances. He left his job in May 2017 and had already begun having trouble keeping up with his rent and utility bills, leading to his electricity being cut off. His financial problems were largely fueled by his gambling addiction. Although Andrew earned a decent wage of around $200 per shift, but during this time, he became addicted to playing cards. He attempted to recover his losses, but things only worsened. He started borrowing money from anyone who would lend it to him. His gambling addiction spiraled out of control, with his gambling expenses reaching about $3,000 each month. In the fall of 2015, Andrew won a big amount of $100,000, but feeling overconfident, he quickly lost it all. In an attempt to win back his losses, he borrowed $10,000 from a man named Paul. Desperate to repay this loan, he continued to take out additional loans, while losing interest in his job, eventually quitting. By spring 2017, he was in deep financial trouble, owing approximately $225,000, with all his credit limits maxed out. Andrew was in a desperate situation, even thinking about withdrawing his savings from a pension fund. He couldn't afford to buy food and had to ask his neighbors for help to feed his daughters during their visit. His life was filled with ongoing tragedy. During the investigation, police found disturbing search queries in his internet history. About a month before the double murder, he had been searching for ways to end his own life. His problems grew worse, and on Christmas Day, he made a tragic decision. He used a brutal method to kill his daughters, doing this act coldly and mercilessly, which makes people doubt his love for them. On January 16th, the hearings for the double murder case began. The prosecutor presented detailed information to the jury about Andrew's relationship and life circumstances just before the crime occurred. The prosecution argued that Andrew willingly put himself in this situation because he could not overcome his gambling addiction. They described his actions as premeditated, using evidence like his internet browsing history to support their argument. In contrast, the defense attorney highlighted flaws in the investigation, pointing out that a patrolman had left the scene while waiting for backup, which left the situation inside unclear. The lawyer argued that Andrew and his children were victims of a killer seeking revenge for Andrew's debts after the officer had left the scene. This allowed the real perpetrator to escape through the fire exit. However, the prosecution rejected these things because the scene was under constant surveillance. There were no signs of a break-in, and the attacker could not have quietly exited the scene without being seen by the police officer. Furthermore, statement of the defense contradicted Andrew's confession made at the hospital. During his hospital stay, he even asked the medical staff to help him die, indicating that he had inflicted injuries on himself and wanted to end his life. It is clear from Andrew's suicide note that he intended to end his life and harm the daughters so that they would be with him in death. However, the lawyer maintained that the family could have been victims of a stranger, a killer who unexpectedly found Andrew and the children in the apartment. Alternatively, they could have all been random victims of a maniac. On April 25, 2017, a woman was attacked and stabbed near Andrew's house, but the police could not identify her attacker. The defense suggested that the same person could be responsible for both this attack and the murder of Andrew's children, who remains at large. However, the details of the wounds and the circumstances of each incident were different, indicating Andrew's guilt. During the presentation of the crime scene and evidence related to the murders of Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew started to cry. The prosecutor asserted that their father, Andrew, was responsible for the murders. One key piece of evidence was blood on the floor that matched Andrew's. If the attacker had been a stranger, they would probably have worn shoes typically found in a home. However, the shoes Andrew was wearing when he was arrested matched those discovered at the crime scene. Also, the forensic expert pointed out that the injuries on Andrew and the daughters were the same. Andrew acknowledged that he had inflicted wounds on himself, and similar cuts were found on the children, indicating that the same person used the same weapon. At trial, the defense attorney argued that Sarah had put pressure on Andrew, leading to the possibility of him acting aggressively. They believe Sarah is the main cause of Andrew's unstable mental health. In response, Sarah countered these claims, saying that Andrew had been aggressive for a long time, which led to their divorce. She was only trying to protect her children from a dangerous and unpredictable situation, which is why she filed complaints with various authorities, all of which were ignored. Sarah was concerned about the safety of her daughters during visits. Recently, Andrew appeared to have changed for the better, but no one realized this was just his cover. The defense continued to argue for Andrew's innocence, portraying him as a victim of his circumstances. They mentioned that Andrew owed $200,000 to another man. Andrew claimed he couldn't pay his debts, which led to him being forced to keep a suspicious bag in his apartment, the contents of which he was unaware of. Various individuals resembling criminals would periodically come to collect it, and Andrew had given them a spare key. According to the lawyers, one of these individuals committed a violent act in the apartment. The prosecution questioned Andrew about why the attacker would kill Aubrey and Chloe in his apartment while he was there. Andrew claimed that he lost consciousness after being struck, and when he regained it, he found Aubrey va Chloe unresponsive. The attacker was still in the apartment, but due to the darkness, Andrew couldn't see his face clearly. However, he noted that the assailant was a dark-skinned man with dark hair. The attacker then ran into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and tug of war, during which Andrew was struck multiple times and lost consciousness again. A mysterious bag was discovered during the investigation, but no evidence of any intruder was found, including DNA or fingerprints. The prosecution argued that Andrew's primary motive for the murders was financial distress. He was struggling to cope with life, unable to pay his debts or child support, leading him to consider killing his children to escape these obligations. The jury deliberated for 3 days and ultimately found Andrew guilty of double second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole in 22 years. Andrew showed no emotion when the verdict was announced, shocking Sarah's family because the sentence was too light. They also found themselves unable to contest the verdict.